Something I like that we did on the cat food,
Uh-huh.
we put the 3 bags in there.
Mhm.
We leave that 1 bag out. So
Yeah.
we dump that 1 bag. That lets me know to reorder.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 18th Faculty Senate meeting. And we'll begin with a roll call. Colleen?
Sorry, I had to find my sheet of paper. Wait. Barber? Barrett?
Here.
Boumier?
Here.
Branyan?
Here.
Brandenburg? Brown? Carmack?
Here.
Chambliss?
Here.
Chong?
Here.
Corley?
Here.
Deweese?
Here.
Edelman?
Here.
Elman?
Here.
Urban?
Here.
Evans?
Here.
Fuentes?
Here.
Galt?
Here.
Gordon? Graffius?
Here.
Green?
Here.
Hadley?
Here.
Hester?
Here.
Ivory?
Here.
Harapasmino? Kellison?
Here.
Khan?
Here.
Kimbrell?
Here.
Neese?
Here.
Kramer?
Here.
You get me?
I'm sorry. Okay. Elizabeth Kramer, I got you. Sungwoo Lee?
Yeah, here.
Trung Lee? McKinnon?
Here.
Mason?
Here.
McClinney?
Here.
McLean?
Here.
Nickel?
Here.
Olivieri?
Here.
Pisani?
Here.
Pinko?
Here.
Richter?
Here.
Scullin?
Here.
Self? Scott Meyer?
Here.
Shoemake?
Here.
Snipes?
Here.
Swift?
Here.
Sykes?
Here.
Talbot?
Here.
Tawidi? Oh,
Sorry.
who was that? Was that Julie Talbot? Okay, I got you. Tawidi?
Here.
Weber?
Here.
Way?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
Wofford? Yoder? All right, we've got quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Well, today both the president and the provost are at a conference, and so both were unable to join us today, I believe. The provost sent us a written summary of some announcements that I forwarded to the Faculty Senate yesterday, and those will go into the minutes. The president is planning to send senators a statement this afternoon in lieu of a personal appearance to make these announcements. And so that too will go into the record. So you should, if you did not receive the provost statements via email yesterday, you'll see those when the minutes come out, and the same will presumably be true of the president's report. The vice provost, though, is with us today, and she would like to make a few announcements. So Dr. Akins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and happy Friday to everyone. I hope you're staying safe and dry under the little storm that we are having here. It is my honor and privilege today to present two new members of our community to you. First, I would like to welcome to University of West Georgia, Welcome West, Dr. Kevin Gwaltney, Executive Director for Accreditation and Quality Enhancement. Dr. Gwaltney, would you like to say several words and present yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Please know that I am very sincere when I say that I am very happy to be a member of the West Georgia family. I look forward to working with many of you in the coming months on the university's reaffirmation of accreditation and quality enhancement plan. In fact, I'd like to thank you for the feedback that you are providing for the quality enhancement plan. I've read the draft that's in the agenda, and it's very detailed and thoughtful feedback. The reaffirmation accreditation is a whole of university effort and requires work from all of us. One way we can contribute is to be current in our fields and perform our duties ethically, timely, and well. And so I look forward to working with you in the coming months.
Thank you, Dr. Gwaltney. As you already probably have guessed, Dr. Gwaltney will be the lead for QEP and our reaffirmation preparation. He has my full support and, of course, Provost and President's support. We will do everything that we can to support his efforts. And I'm very, very happy he's with us. Thank you, Dr. Gwaltney. Another colleague that I would like to present to you is Ms. Ashlesha Pavar. She is the new Executive Director of the Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Assessment. Welcome, West, Ms. Pavar. Would you like to say several words and present yourself?
Thank you, Dr. Akins, and it's nice to meet all of you virtually. I hope to meet every one of you in person someday. I am currently Executive Director for Institutional Effectiveness and Assessment, so I will be heading institutional research as well as assessment. So any of the faculty members or your students, if you need any kind of data for your projects, please feel free to connect with me and we can work together on that. Also, via assessments, I hope to get in contact with each one of you in some way or the other. It's really nice to be here at West Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pawar. Both Dr. Gwaltney and Ms. Pawar are scheduling their meetings with faculty and leadership. So please feel free to reach to them and to discuss what is of importance to you. In addition to these two announcements, I would like to mention another one. You may know that for our campuses in Douglasville and in Newnan, we have recently developed and shared with the deans and the Provost Council, where there are also associate deans and department chairs, 5-year plans for delivery of courses and enrollment management for the two campuses. With that said, it is important that we keep as planned for the next several years, because we would like to garner the support and the trust of the community. We would like to have minimum to 0 cancellations of classes. So when there is an advertisement of what UWG offers on the Newnan and Douglasville campuses, we keep our promise and we are good partners to our school district's counterparts. With that said, if you do not know how these plans look like, or if you have not heard or maybe do not have sufficient information, please feel free to reach to your chair and your college dean because they have the plans in their latest developments. So I wanted to make everyone aware so you have a chance to look. This will reflect on planning, of course, for next year and the years ahead. Again, we hope not to delete classes. We hope to add classes. And it's an important partnership with our school district. So if you have any questions about the scheduling, about the classes, please feel free to approach me, Dr. Gant, or Ms. Rebecca Smith. So this concludes my announcements, Dr. Williams, and if there are any questions I may be able to answer, I would be happy to.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Akins. Any questions for the Vice Provost? Kathy.
Psychology is part of this this Noonan project, and it came to us as quite a surprise. And so I am really curious as to how this decision was made, you know, who ended up on this campus, and how this is going to be supported within the college or within the program of psychology. We have, you know, full classrooms here on the UWG campus. And I'm not sure how we're going to fulfill all these classes on Noonan without extra support from the administration.
Thank you for this question. There have been discussions with the deans and department chairs from the teams on each campus. And I have personally participated in a couple of discussions with Dean Gagnon and one discussion with Elroy. So in regard to that, there are further discussions upcoming for the psychology program in particular. And Ms. Rebecca Smith and I are waiting for an invitation to meet with faculty in the department and have more details that we can offer to the department and hear feedback. To summarize, this planning was made initially in discussion between the campuses and deans. And we would like to hear additional feedback specifically for psychology because this has come up before. And I hope this satisfies at this time. Please do not hesitate to approach me in the future on more details.
Any other questions or follow-up? Seeing no raised hands. Thank you, Dr. Akins. Appreciate that. Well, the next item on the agenda follows very logically, I think, from some of Dr. Akins's announcements, and that is the letter to the Vice Provost to provide faculty feedback on QEP proposals. So this was included as part of the agenda. I hope some of you have had a chance to read it. I just wanted to provide some brief background on this. The Vice Provost asked us several months ago to provide faculty feedback on the QEP, the finalists for the QEP proposals. Originally, there were 6 proposals, but we were specifically asked as the Executive Committee of the Faculty Senate to provide feedback on the 2 finalists. And because this was a request made specifically of the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, it didn't come before the full Senate. And so I'm presenting it as an information item rather than an item for a vote, though I would be happy to take any questions on this or entertain any objections if you have any. Last month, when we were thinking about how best to provide this feedback, we decided that perhaps it would be best to create a survey that would go out to the entire campus, and so anyone would be welcome to send in survey responses. We received 37 responses. They were fairly representative of most academic units on campus. In fact, every academic unit except one. So I think even though the sample size was relatively small, it was broadly representative. And I was impressed with the thought and the amount of detail that many of the respondents put into their comments that we received. A lot of detailed suggestions that I think allowed us to provide some informative feedback. The letter that I drafted was based strictly on this, on the survey responses. And the Executive Committee had access to the survey. They agreed unanimously with only one abstention that this letter did represent an accurate summary of the survey, and therefore was what the Executive Committee wanted to adopt as its official communication to the Vice Provost. So my plan is to send this letter out either this afternoon or sometime next week to the Vice Provost. We were asked to provide this feedback by April 1st. And I would be happy to provide a slightly redacted version of the survey responses to anyone who would like to receive those. So if you would like to receive those, just send me an email. I will need to redact some personal commentary that might identify a faculty respondent, but otherwise, I think you'll be able to see most of the survey, and I can certainly do that if you have questions. I'd also be happy to take questions now if any of you have any concerns over anything that was said in this letter, or if you want to ask questions about the process or our conclusions. Feel free to raise your hand. I don't see any raised hands, so I will go on to the next agenda item. Thank you, and as always, of course, you're welcome to email me. Well, the next item in our committee reports comes from the UPC, which, as usual, has several course proposals, modifications for us to consider. So, Karen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dan, and happy Friday, everyone. We have several things to vote on this afternoon. First, we're going to hear from CACSE, the Department of English, Film, Languages, and Performing Arts. And the first proposal is a request for a new standalone certificate in arts management. This will be a 15-hour credit interdisciplinary certificate. And this will give students an opportunity to learn what it takes to run a nonprofit. And in addition to the certificate, there's also 2 new course requests that is part of the certificate. The first one is Arts and Management 3000, which is an introduction to arts management course. And then the second one is Arts Management 3400, which is the practicum that goes along in the certificate. When we vote on these, just so you'll know, when the vote comes up, there'll be 2 separate votes, one for the certificate first, and then the second vote will be for the new courses. Any questions or comments?
Seeing none, I think we're probably ready for a vote. Looks like both items pass by substantial margins. Back to you, Karen.
Okay, the next item is from the Department of Anthropology, Psychology, and Sociology. And this is a request to revise the Anthropology BS. There are 2 portions to the revision. The first one is adding Anthropology 1101 voices to the required area F. And the second portion is to add Anthropology 4176 to the linguistics section of the major.
Okay, well, seeing no raised hands, I think we're probably ready for a vote on this. And that passes as well. Karen?
All right, moving on. From the Department of Natural Sciences, we're going to take items A through F as a block. This is just a request. They're new course requests, but they're actually the same courses that have been taught. The Board of Regents has requested that everyone use the same course numbers, titles, and descriptions for these biology courses. So even though these are new courses, and it's essentially the same courses, just with different course numbers and descriptions.
I think we're probably ready for a vote. And that passes as well.
All right, moving right along to the Wildlife Ecology Certificate. This is a request for a new program. This will be an embedded certificate for biology majors or minors, or anyone in the BIS pathway in natural resources management. And this program is to support the growth in environmental careers.
I think we're ready for a vote. And that passes as well.
All right, and next from RCOB, and we're going to take these two items as a block, items A and B. As everyone knows, the new Stone Center for Family Business, Entrepreneurship, and Innovation recently opened at RCOB. And so these requests are to change some titles to reflect the association with the Stone Center. So the first one, A, Entrepreneurship and Small Business Management minor. This is a request just to include the word entrepreneurship in the title of that minor. And then the Management BBA is a request to change the title of one of the concentrations from small business management to entrepreneurship and small business management.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. And that passes.
All right, and then our last item is from the University College and the Department of Civic Engagement and Public Service. This is a request for a new course. This is Criminology 4300, Environmental Crime. This course has been taught as a special topics course, and the request is to add this course with a permanent course number.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. And that passes. Thank you, Karen. Our next committee report comes from the Graduate Programs Committee. And so Dina will present several items for us to consider. Dina?
Okay, the first one comes to us from the Department of Computing and Mathematics. It's a request to modify the implied computer science master's degree. And the modification is they're no longer requiring letters of recommendation as part of their admissions process. They did not find that the letters added anything in terms of the admission decision.
Okay, well, I think we're probably ready for a vote on this. And that passes.
Okay, the next one is from the Department of Civic Engagement and Political Science. And the request is to deactivate the Master's in Criminology, the face-to-face modality option, largely because their program is now online and the majority of students have been applying there.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote on that motion. And that passes as well.
Okay, and the last proposal is a modification to the graduate catalog for 22 to 23, and it's graduate course loads for graduate assistantship eligibility. The previous catalog read about, 9 credits in fall and spring and 6 in the summer for full-time enrollment. The modified version would be 6 credits in fall and spring and 3 credits in summer for full-time enrollment to hold a GA.
Well, seeing no raised hands. Oh, yes. Nadia.
Just to clarify, does this mean that GRAs will be allowed to keep their GRA-ship if they're taking 6 hours? Because right now for history GRAs, we've run into the problem where they can only be approved to do so once.
Yeah, I think this would eliminate that problem. And if Toby is on the call, this would eliminate a lot of the requests to still hold that, like, because of that.
Could Toby please confirm?
Well, Toby is on the call. Perhaps he stepped away for the moment, but I would agree with you, Dina. I think if this becomes policy, then policy would have to be followed. So I assume that it would change the way things are done.
Is there any chance to have a clear statement to that effect in the minutes or in the grad handbook? Because this has been a source of considerable frustration over the last 2 years.
Well, I mean, I think I think there's probably.
Excuse me, Dan, are you there?
Okay. Oh, Toby?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Couldn't find my screen to unmute. Yes, Nadia, can you repeat your question one more time?
Will graduate students now not have to get that special exemption to BGRAs if they're taking 6 hours?
Correct, yes. We were in a situation where over the past, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, certain programs had exemptions. There were 15 program exemptions whereby those programs could have assistantships with only 6 hours. So we already had 15 programs that had the exemption. And moving forward, we just thought it was fair to make that adjustment to 6 hours for all programs. And our average grad student takes 6.8 hours. So that pretty much tells us for full time for graduate, 6 hours, 6 to 7 hours is really full time. So we wanted to give all programs the opportunity to play on a level playing field. We thought it benefited the programs wanted it, and we know it benefits the students. So that will eliminate having to use the form.
Thank you. As a program that was recently denied this exemption when we petitioned, I really appreciate this.
Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.
Any other discussion?
I just want to add that I'll make sure that usually what we do whenever we have a vote, we just have the vote in the minutes, but I'll make sure to add that statement in the minutes to clarify.
Well, I think we are probably ready for a vote. And this passes. Well, thank you, Dina. Thank you, everyone. We now move to a discussion of a major overhaul of our P&T annual review PTR system. And the FDC, of course, under Patrick's direction, has been working on this for several months with a lot of discussion with various constituents on campus, various members of the campus community, and we've now been presented with a massive package. This time for discussion. Next month, the plan is to have a vote. So this is an opportunity to voice any concerns, questions, flesh out any suggested revisions, and then send back the comments to the FDC, and then we'll be prepared to vote on this as a package in April. So Patrick is going to have a lot more detail on all of this. Patrick, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, and thank you for your patience here. I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity to present our work. I would like to begin really to mostly express my gratitude to my fellow FDC members who've done really countless hours of work on this. We started in early fall already last semester to really respond to the policies that were proposed and then passed by the USG. There was actually a letter that we had written and sent to from the executive committee to the USG and the chancellor or interim chancellor. We had then received the final policy, formed a or added a group of liaisons to the FDC to help us with the collection of feedback from across the university. They were all incredibly helpful. We probably collected over 80 or 90 pages of feedback from all across the university. So this was really a truly collaborative effort, and we've taken all of those suggestions, questions, concerns very much into consideration in drafting our changes. We had then a series of workshops to work on different parts of this over the early part of the spring semester, and recently finished this draft that you're looking at here. All right, so I'm projecting here a slightly different version of this. Actually, there was a mistake I made. This little preamble here didn't make it in the final agenda, but I'd like to read it. In addition to the background and sort of a little historical overview that I already presented, I wanted to mention that the goal of the FDC has been to implement these BOR mandated changes. First of all, I want to emphasize that these came clearly from the Board of Regents / USG and were not initiated by the FDC or by UWG more specifically. But really our mission has been to create policies that fit our institutional mission and ensure academic freedom and due process. So our policy revisions in particular have seized upon this statement from the USG Academic Affairs Handbook, which came out in its finalized form earlier this February. And it states, each institution is responsible for establishing definitive policies, processes, and stated criteria for faculty evaluation that are aligned with the mission, statutes, and academic organization of the institution, and are consistent with Regents' policies. The policies, processes, and stated criteria must incorporate appropriate due process mechanisms and principles of academic freedom, which in particular, as I said, we have paid attention to and focused on. So there are three main areas of revision. There are first the intertwining of student success activities with teaching, service, and professional development for both reporting and evaluation purposes. Then the strengthening of due process mechanisms in the annual evaluation system, especially by trying to create a higher level of consultation and collaboration among all stakeholders. And lastly, we have incorporated the USG mandated new post-tenure review process, which includes a corrective post-tenure review after a performance remediation plan was put in place 2 years in a row. So the new rules call for a corrective post-tenure review, which however will look the same way as post-tenure review so far has been conducted on our campus. So it's a peer-led process. And then in addition, we tried to create due process mechanisms that, as far as possible, in accordance with the new USG guidelines, lean on and incorporate previous cross-campus post-tenure review advisory committee. And they will be included again as an appeals, or to fulfill an appeals function before any kind of remedial action as prescribed by the USG would be taken. So I want to give everybody the opportunity here to ask specific questions before that, or make further suggestions. I also wanted to mention that through your liaisons, through me directly or your FDC members, feel free to send us any revision or editorial comments. So it could be anything from requested changes to the wording to simple editing mistakes or better wordsmithing. We're open to all of this. The further plan here to go forward from this, or from today, is for me to collect all of the feedback that we're receiving here and that I'm already receiving from across campus, the liaisons from different colleges. I will be collecting those over spring break, hopefully drafting some potential changes already precipitated by those requests. And then we'll have an FTC meeting to have a vote on any last changes before moving on. I'm proud to report that 2 other FTC members and I, that was Dion Kay and Farouk Khan, already met this last Tuesday with Dr. Akins and Dr. Preston. And Dr. Preston is particularly impressed with our work here and has requested only 2 minor changes. One was to a wording about student success activities. There was a parenthetical insertion that he asked us to probably take out. And the second one was in the annual evaluation section to address by fleshing out what we mean by process over product. And we had some conversation about that. He totally concurs that our goal here must be to encourage risk-taking, long process work, and really to account for the length of time that it takes to create long process projects. And therefore, yeah, we really totally concurs with that. And it's really a wording. Finally, he's actually also suggested that we expand upon options for the university to reward any kind of exceeds or successful conclusion of post-tenure review. So to create more of a reward system in the handbook than we've already had. So given that we already have the support from the provost, we'll make some further changes to respond to faculty feedback and concerns here, resubmitted to Dr. Preston, who will then submit it for approval to the USG, with our goal being to actually approve this at the April faculty meeting. It's a bit of a tense or tight timeline, but this is certainly our first goal. There's a potential for a June vote, but really our goal is to get this wrapped up in April. Let me see if there's anything I wanted to mention up front. This is in terms of timeline. Oh yeah, I also wanted to mention that in working through the entire handbook as an FTC, we have certainly found several areas where the handbook could be improved in areas not affected by the PTR revisions. So we have not necessarily addressed those, except for where they were directly affecting faculty evaluation processes. So there were a couple of additions we had to make to to P&T, so post in promotion and tenure. Additionally, we would like to actually revise in this particular round of revisions the entire handbook to use non-binary pronouns, gender binary pronouns, and so refer to, instead of his or her, or his and her, to them or they. So that is something that you already see in the revisions in red that we made, but we'd like to replicate that in the entire document, if that's something that is supported by the faculty. And let me see if there's one final comment I wanted to make. Oh, additionally, we've also received a proposal from our local AAUP for a strengthening of the academic freedom provisions in the handbook. These were actually in section 109 of the handbook already. The language submitted strengthens those, because this section was not actually directly affected by the mandated USG mandated PTR and annual evaluation revisions. The FTC will discuss these, and then if the committee supports them, we will propose them separately to the Senate. because they would not be subject to the approval requirement by the USG, because the USG has, of course, required that these policy changes before being implemented on campuses would be approved by the chancellor. So I think that's all kind of I wanted to say as a preamble, but I'm open to any questions, suggestions. I mean, if there are editorial suggestions, improvements in language that are not necessarily of substance, it might make sense just to expedite this to just send them by email. There's certainly probably some spelling mistakes, formatting mistakes, numbering mistakes in here. And so I appreciate any help to clear all that up. All right,
Yeah, I think we do have some questions.
Please.
And so in just a second, I'll go to Shelley, who's had her hand raised. But first, I just wanted to make a quick comment in terms of revising the faculty handbook. I think based on comments that have previously been made in Senate meetings, I think there would be quite a number of people in support of that sort of sweeping handbook revision. I do think that it would be useful to coordinate that with the Rules Committee, even if the FDC is taking the lead on that. Traditionally, according to the charter of the committees, the Rules Committee has had the oversight overall of our policies. And so while the FDC obviously controls a substantial amount of the faculty handbook that directly pertains to faculty, particularly in the promotion and tenure process, I think that sort of sweeping revision of the handbook would probably need to run through the Rules Committee, though the chair may well choose to delegate that. I mean, if you've already done the work and you can present a draft to the Rules Committee, I wouldn't see a problem with that. It would just obviously need to be coordinated and ultimately come with the Rules Committee's approval. But other than that, we can, I think, go back to the discussion of obviously what you really wanted to talk about, which is PTR and P&T and annual evaluation. And Shelley may have a comment or question on that. Shelley?
Thanks, Patrick, and thank you to Patrick and the FTC for all this work. It's great. May I request that anytime scholarship is mentioned, that creative activity be also included? So for example, on page 185, intertwining of student success activities into teaching service and scholarship, could that be scholarship/creative activity? And then later in that paragraph, it says, for example, faculty research scholarship, publications and grants developed, could creative activity also be listed in there? And I can send you more as I read through. Thanks.
Yeah, I absolutely think that would be a great improvement. And I would appreciate also the help if you could already look through it and just send me all the references where that would apply. Then I can just go through it and plug in basically. So
sure.
Yeah. All right, let me see. Actually, I don't know if I should be monitoring the chat here. I'm kind of trying to balance all these windows, so it's probably best.
Yeah, so far nothing. I can I guess I can try to monitor the chat.
Yeah, why don't you
so
monitor?
If there are any questions coming in, or comments, I'll let you know. But yeah, otherwise I think you can proceed. I think you had a lot more of a presentation to give, I believe, about all of the changes that you're making, including how you decided to handle the student success activities, and then how you try to protect due process for faculty in the PTR. And there are other things as well. So feel free to proceed with all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can, I don't know how much time people had already to look at this, but I should definitely highlight some of the main areas here. So, sorry, Dan or Colleen, can you still see the document that I'm projecting?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so we essentially front-loaded the definition of student success activities before the area that mentions minimum criteria for appointment, because their student success would have to, for the first time, be incorporated. So we added a brief definition that in part leans on the BLR Academic Affairs Handbook and mentions faculty members' involvement in activities inside and outside the classroom that deepen student learning. And we added here that faculty members contribute in their student success activities to the intellectual, academic, and professional growth of prospective, current, and former students. And this is important. This will also be repeated in the applicable sections throughout this document, that for both reporting and evaluation purposes, faculty will identify student success activities folded in or intertwined with teaching, service, and professional growth and development. So we consider it very important for both workload equity and due process to fold this into the existing areas. There's another statement later on I can get to, but I don't want to jump around too much, that fleshes out more in detail how all of the activities, including teaching, service, and professional growth and development, and creative activities, to add Shelley's suggestion here, already contribute integrally to student success. And that therefore, we can only really accord their true role of student success activities if reported in these areas. There was also some concern voiced by multiple faculty throughout that if they were pulled out into a fourth or a separate category, this would then really deplete the existing area. So I do believe that our approach here has actually addressed that quite nicely. So, but any questions as I highlight some of these more important areas about this specifically?
So I guess as a practical matter, the way that faculty would experience this, I assume, is that, for example, if they're going up for tenure and promotion or PTR under this system, when they're writing their narrative, they would have a section explaining how what they've done contributes to student success, but it would reiterate and provide additional explanation for things that they might already have mentioned in the other areas. Is that,
there would be some intentional redundancy and reiteration, but also as a intentional sort of articulation of those activities in a separate narrative section. That does not mean, however, that it would be a separate category of evaluation. So student success activities will still be evaluated within the existing areas. I think that's a little bit clearer also once we get to the annual evaluation section, because that's where it becomes more of a concrete, but the process is addressed more concretely how that's being done. I just want to highlight here in passing that for the probationary period for non-tenured or tenured faculty, there was some missing language here that, or we emphasized further that promotion and tenure policies have to be articulated within departments, or in case that disciplines are housed in programs that are nestled within departments, they have to establish discipline-specific expectations. I've heard from a few folks across campus that they didn't necessarily have that, although as you can see here by the language in black, even in the old handbook, we already had the provision that to say this handbook, as well as the written departmental promotion and tenure policies, should be afforded to faculty members. So the old version of the handbook already assumed that this existed or that this was required. Let me, like I said, this was just a passing comment where we felt we had to make a little bit of an adjustment. Move on to criteria for promotion. Again here, even though this was not directly addressed by the USG policy changes, we of course had to incorporate student success activities. And this is where we get more into the weeds, so to say, about the philosophy behind the way we incorporate student success activities. I don't want to read through this verbatim, but the highlights here really are that faculty, again, are already in all of their activities benefiting students. So we really want to be quite comprehensive in the way that we conceptualize this. So for example, even if you're not necessarily writing your research article with a student as an undergraduate research project, for example, your research nevertheless informs your teaching, for example, or your publications increase the profile of yourself and as a scholar, as an artist, or as a scientist, and additionally raise the profile and the reputation of the university. So we really want to sharpen in the language in this section here, everybody's understanding for student success activities really being intertwined with all of our work, both in a direct and indirect fashion, and to encourage faculty to articulate that on multiple levels. Evidentiary sources, again, they should be recorded for student success activities with the other areas, and we just settled on the method of adding an asterisk if a, let's say, scholarly activity was also contributed to student success in the reporting of the faculty member. And then, of course, again, there could be a narrative section that fleshes out everything and pulls it together under the aegis of student success activities. And as you can see here, whenever there's a listing of evidence or criteria, we have added the asterisk to designate that this can then be reiterated or tied into the student success activity area. There have also been various suggestions for how we should articulate what student success activities concretely could be, all the way from some folks suggesting we could have a comprehensive list, but we got so many, we decided that was not necessarily advisable and would be very unwieldy. So we decided on the categories that you see here, in each category substantiated with 3 examples. And there's a sort of a little preamble comment that says these are not prescriptive, they're also not comprehensive. So we encourage faculty to think of any other student success activity that they are conducting as appropriate, and additionally for programs and disciplines in particular in each department, each program, to articulate what in their area counts or is encouraged as a student success activity. So that is probably a most detailed list or that references these activities. All right, that's, I think, the main section referring to what I in brief called SSAs. Any questions or suggestions, concerns?
Yeah, so any questions on student success activities? I guess while we're waiting for a hand to be raised, I have a question about this. So if, since these SSAs are embedded within the other 3 categories, is it possible for a faculty member to achieve satisfactory performance in all 3 categories and yet unsatisfactory performance in student success activities? And if so, what exactly would be the criteria by which that determination would be made if these SSAs are folded in? And could an individual program create, I guess, a minimum threshold for student success activities, and what would that look like if the student success activities are not exactly being evaluated independently?
Yeah, I think here's the idea. I skipped forward in response to this, Dan, to the section, just to explain to everyone where I went here on, excuse me. This is, I'm sorry. Oh, the annual evaluation section. So I want to highlight a few things that we put in here that might flesh out a little bit or respond to your question. So first of all, faculty in each unit must develop specific criteria and rubrics regarding annual evaluations in their discipline. So this in general needs to flesh out and complement what we have for the university at large here in the faculty handbook. So such criteria should value process over product. That was just as a footnote where Dr. Preston suggested fleshing out a little bit more, but maintaining the spirit of this point. In accordance with the considerable differences among disciplines, each unit must define criteria for faculty progress that then corresponds with the Likert scale. And I just want to set this up as context for then student success activities should be reported and assessed similar to high impact practices. That means by designating activities and achievements as SSAs. In the campus-wide reporting platforms, such as what we're using right now, Interfolio, these should be done by checking an SSA designation. Now, the next point here, uploading supporting evidence. I've had some useful suggestions already in this regard that this is probably not something we need to add if it's not required for other areas. So we will certainly discuss probably taking that out just as a side note. But next, to respond again, Dan, to your question, in narrative evaluations, faculty should highlight SSAs with an asterisk and cumulatively narrate how their work in teaching service and or professional development contributes to student success. The reporting of student success activities thus allows faculty to showcase their achievements and potentially improve their evaluated ranking on the scale below. Units are encouraged to develop lists of best practices in the discipline designed to enhance student success. So specifically what we mean by reporting and improving their standing is this. So let's say, for example, Dan, you're doing sort of meets expectations work in scholarship. I'm saying that because it's kind of a good joke, right? Because you don't. You certainly exceed expectations there. But let's say you were, right? But you're doing plenty for meets expectations, but you don't report any student success activities there, right? So that absence of student success activities in your professional development wouldn't therefore then bring you to a 1 or a 2, right? However, by the same token, let's say you are doing enough to get a meets in scholarship, but rather than doing a lot of your own scholarship, you are on, I don't know, let's say we had a doctoral program in history and 5 dissertation committees, on 3 master's committees, and you're advising a multitude of students on their scholarship, okay? So you would report this as student success activities. And so instead of just getting a meets, you could then use the SSAs to get an exceeds expectations. So see, the underlying principle here is that student success activities, in a way for faculty evaluation purposes, function kind of like the proverbial carrot. The more you do, the more you can improve your standing, okay? Now, if without those SEAs, let's say you've published 2 books in 1 year, but you don't report student success activities, it would not be fair to then ding you because you published 2 monographs, right? So that's the idea here, that it allows faculty to do more for student success and to harness those increased activities if they want to improve their performance. But on the flip side, if they already perform in those areas to get a meets or better, student success activities would not harm them. Otherwise, folding them into the areas would logically actually produce a risk to faculty. And so that's something we really discussed in this process. By folding them in, could this potentially be detrimental to people? And so that's the way we've written it here. So, but I'm curious if this makes sense to people, if you have any questions or et cetera.
Yeah, that was a good explanation. Thank you. I guess I'm
very roundabout, but sorry.
I guess I'm still trying to figure out. Yeah, I know you've really tried to give faculty the maximum number of ways to meet this, and I appreciate that. And you don't want to create an additional burden to faculty. I guess I'm wondering though, is there is there any stick at all when it comes? I know there's a carrot, but is there any stick at all when it comes to student success activities? That is, suppose that, for the purposes of argument, suppose I, in the view of my colleagues, just really wasn't doing very much for student success. Every time there was a question about, who's going to advise the student organization, or, who's going to serve on a thesis committee, I found excuses and, was really working on my own scholarship, and my classes were, reasonably good, and I received good teaching evaluations, but there wasn't really a sense that I was doing anything directly for the students that went beyond the minimum expectations of teaching. So if that were the case, would there be anything that the chair or a P&T committee could do to try to prompt me to give greater attention to student success activities? Or is this really just a bonus, as you described it, something that would be icing on the cake and very helpful for those people who, perhaps felt like they could use some enhancement in the other categories? But what if I decided I don't really need it and I'm willing to take the risk? Can someone force me to engage in more student success activities?
Yeah, let me go back to the earlier section about the intertwining here. And really, I think the philosophy is that if you are doing excellent work in teaching, service, and scholarship, you are most likely already doing excellent work for student success. You just have to articulate it. If we get a little bit further down in the annual evaluation system, we actually created a optional meeting for faculty and chairs to get together to talk about what the finalized evaluation will look like. And so one of the purposes of that meeting could be to say, all right, look, Dan, you're doing all of these amazing things here, but you're not really doing enough to show how your performance helps student success. So number one, in the large majority of cases, I think it is really a matter of training ourselves to articulate how the work we do benefits student success. Because if you are, the scenario that you're describing would suggest then to me that you actually have a service problem, or that in your service, you're not really doing anything that ultimately benefits the department. Because what we're trying to articulate here is there would be very, very few cases in which you could be benefiting the department without benefiting students. I don't think that makes sense, right? The work of the department is for the students. So it's just a matter of you making those connections. And so I think the stick is ultimately that you're losing out on opportunities if you're not doing that in a kind of articulation to improve yourself. But it would not be fair for somebody who otherwise would be adjudged to exceed expectations to ding that person because they are supposedly deficient in student success activities. It would be unlikely that they are.
Yeah, thank you. Mike.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the line that says academic disciplines and units across campus must develop specific examples of student success activities. Is it the case that only those student success activities that fall within that discipline's definitions will count, or can a faculty get credit for interdisciplinary student success activities, or even student success activities that fall outside of their specific discipline? How would that work?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I need to highlight for myself, Mike. I don't know if must is the best choice here. The idea behind that was that it is best for colleagues in programs, in disciplines to flesh out what they could do. Now, I would then, according to with your point here, say that they should also mention interdisciplinary work. But we do not have why it's, let me think about how best to put this. Why we put faculty in units and departments, because that's where the creation of policies and criteria at the micro level are housed. I don't think we have an interdisciplinary sort of body that creates criteria for faculty evaluation. But what I think, listening to your comment, would make sense is to add to it that we also encourage for student success interdisciplinary activities. To already have that in there and then leave it to programs to flesh those out. Would that be kind of responding to your comment? I certainly don't include those.
I think so. The example I'm thinking of is this past week, I was walking on campus and I ran across a student I had in an interdisciplinary course several years ago, and she has started a new organization in nursing, Fun for Us Nursing. And in talking with her, let's say she and I talk about some collaboration where as a faculty member, I might help them, but I'm not in nursing. So does the help that I do for that act, which is definitely a student success activity, but it's not for students in the School of Communication, Film and Media, can I still get credit for that? That's sort of what I was making sure of.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so I would really think it's a good idea for us to add a sort of underscoring that interdisciplinary work should count there, and then still leave it up to flesh out the details. To, let's say, nursing can then say, if somebody could work with somebody in psychology, that would be both practical and advisable. But yeah, I think we should have an umbrella reference to that. So thank you.
Rosemary.
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on Dan's question. If I'm reading this correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong, please, Patrick, when we get our annual evaluations or our promotion reviews, et cetera, we're not going to be separately evaluated in the category of student success activities. So our rankings of 1 through 5 on the Likert scale will still only be in those traditional categories. So would it even be possible under that model to receive a negative evaluation specifically in student success activities?
Not the way that we've written it.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's the idea, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Because otherwise, then it wouldn't make sense to have it folded in, to be honest. Then if that still were possible, then you might as well draw it out to a separate category.
Anything else on this point of student success activities? Maybe not, maybe we've covered everything. So I know there's some other components of this package, particularly the PTR, that I think you would probably want to talk about, Patrick. So I'll turn things back to you.
Yeah, I do want to continue a little bit in the annual evaluation section. So first of all, let me preface this by saying that we spent a good bit of time on this because especially for tenured professors, annual evaluation will take on a very distinctly new and more high stakes role, specifically because after 2 consecutive does not meets on the annual evaluation, according to the Board of Regents mandate, a corrective post-tenure review, which is spelled out further below, will be triggered. So that there is some kind of remedial process that comes up as a result of these annual evaluations makes this more high stakes. So we spent a good bit of time on this. First of all, I wanted to highlight this Likert scale, which has been produced as part of the USG Academic Affairs Handbook. And so this is something that every campus must follow. Okay, so this is kind of, again, beyond the, not up for negotiation. We did add, though, that anybody who is in their annual evaluation ranked as a number 2 or 1, that would mean does not meet or needs improvement, which are the 2 categories out of the 5 that are unsatisfactory. For those, then the annual evaluation produced by the supervisor should specifically document to substantiate why the faculty members received this. We added some additional measures in the procedure. First of all, I think this is already practice that the provost and VPA's office establish a clear timeline for the cycle, but we thought it would be helpful to have that as a specific requirement in here. Then I think I referenced this earlier already, that the immediate supervisor will offer, this would not be mandatory, but offer faculty members the opportunity to discuss a draft. And this is important, especially coming out of multiple comments from CACSI and perhaps also UC, colleges that were subject to restructuring 2 years ago, where chairs are not necessarily also faculty in the discipline of the faculty members that are housed within that division or within that department. And therefore, what we're trying to do here is early on provide for opportunities where potential misunderstandings or simply lack of documentation or lack of explanation for somebody's activity leads to a potential does not meet that could be avoided if an early dialogue was to be had. So this is something that is offered. Then further down, of course, there's a finalized evaluation as traditionally done, will be received and acknowledged by the faculty members. But then there is an additional option to appeal the evaluation, either in full or in one category. And then there's a process following here in general, outside of that appeals option, which is spelled out further below. And within 10 working days, there will be acknowledgement and so forth. And what's in bold here, the performance remediation plan, that is a new instrument that, again, was mandated by the USG, that in response to, and this is not just for tenured professors, the way I think I understand the policy, and I think it's correct, this is for any annual evaluation. The chair will have to do a performance remediation plan. And so the additional language here spells out how that is drawn up, and we added that it must be very collaboratively done between the faculty member, the supervisor, and potentially a mentor that, or a peer mentor who the faculty member requests to be involved. And I think this is, we thought that was especially important for newer faculty members, let's say first or second year assistant professors who are really still getting their chops and really need somebody, again, in their discipline, a mentor to help articulate their specific disciplinary or professional standards, how they're abiding by this, and so forth. So there's a little bit of a timeline spelled out. I think you can read over this on your own. Of course, the professional remediation plan and the results of that will become part of the faculty member's record as prescribed by the USG again. This will be of interest probably that, again, the Board of Regents policies stipulate that there should be administrative review that will be utilized as part of pre-tenure and post-tenure review, as well as retention, promotion, tenure decisions. This is essentially directly from their new policies. However, we added as a due process protection here the option to appeal. So to appeal, you can either do so to the Promotion and Tenure Committee, so a peer committee within your program or department, or to the dean. We wanted to allow for the possibility that not necessarily every faculty member feels comfortable doing this with their peer committee. So that is an option. There will be then a diligent review of the material by the either committee or the dean. There will be a collaborative meeting again, and either a mutually agreed upon revised evaluation that becomes the evaluation of record, or if there is no mutually agreeable resolution, then the final result is that either the dean or peer committee's evaluation will become the evaluation of record. So ultimately, of course, an evaluation will have to be produced and go on record, but we all felt that offering this additional appeals option is crucial because of the newly heightened importance afforded to annual evaluations by the USG policy. So I know that's a lot to chew on. We had several days of meetings just on annual evaluation. So any questions, discussions, feedback on this section?
Any questions on this? Well, I would say point number 3 is a rather bold move that I think faculty will appreciate. Are you sure it's compatible with USG policies? Because I know the USG entrusts chairs with the responsibility to produce annual evaluations. So here what you're saying is if an overwhelming number of people say this evaluation is out of line, the chair loses their opportunity to produce an evaluation that year. So is that, I mean, I think that's a fascinating empowerment of the faculty that I think faculty would appreciate. I guess I'm just wondering, are you sure it passes muster? And of course, if it doesn't, I mean, worst thing that happens is USG comes back and says in the fall, we need to revisit this, which is not the worst thing in the world. But I was just wondering if that's something that your committee discussed at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We discussed this a good bit, whether we should even put this in there, because I mean, yeah, we agree with what you said, that it might seem bold or whatever you want to call it. But on the other hand, number one, this is not specifically excluded by the Board of Regents policy. Okay, you're a historian. You could probably what are the enumerated rights and the non-enumerated rights in the Constitution, right? So I don't know, however you want to look at it. What is, just for sort of background sake, I do want to mention that in the draft version of the new Academic Affairs Handbook, there was actually a specific note to exclude an appeals option from annual evaluations. And that is actually did not make it into the final form. I cannot say anything about the trajectory that led to this change or to the final form, but I can only say that it is not in there, and that as a preamble, the Academic Affairs Handbook calls for campuses to create their own due process protections. So there must, in other words, have due process protections in mind that are not already spelled out by the USG. So they have to go somewhere. And my response would be, if there are questions on this, well, this is ultimately how we are translating your overall mandate here. So I would go with it. We can always take it out in the end. Other questions? I see there's some in the chat here. Dan, are you looking at those?
I'm looking at the chat. There's nothing specifically directed to you.
These are just comments.
Random comments at different points.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't see anyone else that wants to weigh in on this. So I think you're free to go to the next section if you want. Thanks.
All right, post-tenure review. So first of all, this was already practiced, but it's just a little bit clarifying language, I suppose, from the USG that within 5 years of receiving tenure, and then again, at least once every 5 years thereafter, tenured faculty must go through post-tenure review. So that is your ordinary post-tenure review that's referenced there, okay? There was no direct requirement to revise the way that regular post-tenure review is conducted on campuses. So when you see, and I'm going to scroll through this rather quickly, the implementation, criteria, documentation, formation of the advisory committees, you will see that there is no change by and large here. And the reason for that is that changes by the USG are actually of a different nature. So if you're going through regular post-tenure review, relatively little should change for you how that's happening. What has changed is the response to a negative post-tenure review. So let's say you go through your regular scheduled post-tenure review, but the review committee gives you a does not meet expectations, okay? And then the result is a performance improvement plan, which we try to figure out how best to structure that will be defined down here after the corrective post-tenure review. Oh, actually, I think I missed one important note. Oh, yeah. My apologies. Under general implementation procedures, the Board of Regents also came up with the option that a faculty member could elect to voluntarily undergo post-tenure review early, okay? They phrase it kind of like, okay, we give you that choice in case you want to kind of know where you stand. We had a lot of discussion about that and ultimately could not think of a lot of good reasons why somebody would necessarily do that. Because if you're not being evaluated as meeting expectations, then you will automatically undergo the corrective post-tenure review, okay? We'll get to that in a second. However, if you choose to go up early and the result is that you do not meet expectations as a result of your early post-tenure review, then you get a performance improvement plan anyway, which is a result automatically, as you will see below, of a corrective post-tenure review. So we had to include it because it's in the USG Academic Affairs Handbook, but unless we're missing something here, we really don't see an advantage to that. I don't know if there's anybody who has any further illuminating thought on it, but it is in there, but we did not flesh it out. All right, corrective post-tenure review. So this is where the new USG rules have made a significant change here. The tenured faculty members who receive an unsatisfactory annual review 2 years in a row. And by the way, this does not have to be in the same category, which, just as a side note, also made us feel that it was important not to proliferate the number of categories, because a does not meet in any of 3 categories can trigger this now. Whereas if we created the 4th category, it would be 1 in 4 categories. So you can see that increases the odds there of getting it does not meet in 1 out of 4 versus 1 out of 3. So if you have that 2 years consecutively, I'm sort of waving my hand here over consecutive because that is important. That let's say in year 1 after tenure, you get a does not meet, and then you get 2 years just fine. And then in your 3rd or 4th year, you get a does not meet. That would presumably, if applied correctly, not trigger this corrective post-tenure review, because this is language directly from the USG that it has to be consecutive annual evaluations, okay? So if then you get a after the first negative evaluation, we get a remediation plan. And if after the next year you still have not improved, then you get this corrective post-tenure review. This is not a long paragraph because what we said here is that corrective post-tenure review works exactly the same way with the customary peer committee as your ordinary or regularly scheduled post-tenure review. Now, if as a result, judged by your peer committee, you actually do not meet expectations, then your chair, in collaboration with that committee and yourself as a faculty member, will create this performance improvement plan, which with some timing differences, or timeline differences, is essentially the same as this performance remediation plan. So let's say you've gone through corrective post-tenure review, you get the performance improvement plan, and then after the completion of that plan, you still do not meet expectations, then the USG has mandated a remedial process to kick in. And I'm going to halt there for a second, see if you have any questions about PTR up to that point.
Yeah, I do have a question that came in.
Yes.
Through the chat, through a private message. It actually, I think, may pertain to the last thing that you mentioned in the previous section. So the question is there a concern with the wording seeming to equate the dean and peer committee? And what is the criteria for determining which entity needs to be chosen? I think you said the faculty member in question would choose whether it's the dean or peer committee, right? This is before the PTR when we were talking about annual evaluations. I think.
Okay, fine.
Message came in just after we had transitioned, but it's about that previous section. So I think, yeah, annual evaluation appeals. It's in this section, and yeah. So I think point number one is that faculty members have the choice to appeal either to a panel of peers or the dean. But
Right.
then I think, so I think that answers the second question that this faculty member had, but there may have been a point here where you were talking about the dean and peer committee or dean or peer committee, and I'm not entirely sure what the concern is, but the questioner asked is there concern with equating these two, the dean and peer committee? So I guess, I mean, feel free to address it if you'd like.
Yeah, I don't think they're meant to be equated. I think, I mean, it could be that there's some slippage here that's unintended, and maybe you can if you get a private message in the chat, request that it's related per email to me or something, because I'm right now not sure where that is, but I'm certainly open to addressing if there was a slippage in the way we formulated this. I can only say that the way that it's written here, the idea is that it is not both, so that it's really up to the faculty member to say, I prefer my peer committee for this appeals function, or I prefer the dean. Now, if let's say you choose the peer committee, that would mean then the way we've written it, or at least intended it, is that the dean then would not be involved, or vice versa. I mean, it's possible that you're in a program and you feel like your peers are hostile to you, then maybe appealing it to the dean would be a better choice. But there has to be some appeals body or appeals authority. So that's essentially the choices we've seen here.
Yeah.
Not sure if that addresses it, but like I said, if the person who sent you that note would like to kind of like point out a different section where maybe then we haven't missed creating some parallelism in wording, then I'd really appreciate seeing that. Because that was, we had so many sessions, that was oftentimes the challenge, to really make sure that something we fleshed out in one place really cohered with practice in another place.
Yeah. So again, to the person who wrote this, if you want to, if you want to follow up with Patrick further, you're more than welcome to, or through me, if you want to do that too. I'll be happy to pass along any messages, whether signed or unsigned. It can preserve anonymity if anyone wants it. So with this peer committee, maybe I missed it, but I know you had said this could be the PMT committee, but it doesn't directly, the phrase used is peer committee. So is this something that is newly constituted by the faculty member? And if so, how is the peer committee formed?
Okay, so what we did there is we allowed the option that, let's say, in a department that's very strongly dominated by lecturers, okay, like certain departments in the UC right now, they would not be affected by PTR, but they certainly would be affected by the outcome of an annual evaluation, right? So I do think, again, we could probably potentially improve the language, but the intent here was that it could be the PTR committee. So if a tenured faculty member or tenured track faculty member appeals, peers would mean presumably other tenured faculty members. But if you're in a department where it's all or mostly lecturers, like say in general education, then presumably it would be a body of other lecturers. Now, we did not spell that out how that would be formed, but I think then that program or discipline would have to, I don't know, I guess they would have to create a body, but they couldn't necessarily go to some other department looking for a P&T committee if they don't have one.
Yeah, I guess that's something we should definitely discuss including, because I know based on the discussions I've had with various people in the last few months, not about this, but just about other things that require review committees, whether it's grievances or other things that the Senate is involved in. That question of how this is constituted is really important. And so if we have an appeals committee or the option to create an appeals committee, you need to either discuss how it's formed, or you need to discuss who gets to make the decision as to how it's formed. Is it the chair? Is it the dean? Since this is a standoff with the chair, presumably it would bias the case a bit if the chair appointed the peers. But on the other hand, if the faculty member just got to choose people, that obviously would seem to be a problem too. So the question is, how exactly is that going to work?
Yeah, actually, let me jump back there one more time. Sorry, hold on. So what I said here, or what we said here, is the department/program P&T advisory committee. We did have a good bit of discussion there. We even batted around the idea, should the faculty member alone be able to pick the peers? But that would then not seem fair to the chair, or would really seem like, okay, you can just cherry pick your friends from your department or something. So I think the spirit behind saying P&T advisory committee, that this would be a committee that is already in charge of discussing personnel matters, whether it's third-year review, promotion and tenure, PTR, et cetera, et cetera. So like in English, for example, that's called the Faculty Status Committee, and it's a committee consisting of tenured faculty in the program, okay? So it would not be a committee that even would have to be constituted for the purpose of an appeal. So there would be no debate, the constitution of this appeals committee was somehow biased either in favor of this person or against that person, because it would simply be the standing committee that's already in charge of considering personnel action. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but I guess it's not spelled out in the documents. So that's what I would want to see, is something spelled out very precisely, so that someone reading this 3 years from now who was not part of this Senate meeting, not part of this discussion, would easily be able to determine how to proceed, how to constitute that committee.
Okay.
And you could even say that it's it could be created by if you don't want to say that the committee is the P&T committee, you could say that the P&T committee gets to form the appeals committee, and you should probably also mention how many people will be on it, and whether anyone has the right to strike someone from the committee. All those things are spelled out with our grievance procedures. So I think we have page and a half or so of maybe more about how grievance procedures proceed and how committees are formed for a grievance. And so since this is a very closely parallel case, it's essentially a grievance, then I think we would need some sort of analogous formulation of exactly how this is supposed to proceed, because, you know, we tend, maybe it sounds a little extreme, but I don't think it is. It's essentially a legal proceeding. You know, the outcome is going to have profound implications for a person's career. The person is essentially challenging a decision that's already been made. So I would say that the more precision that we can have, the fewer difficult questions and challenges we'll have later. And Yvonne just said something in the chat. It says, in departments with very different disciplines, perhaps the faculty member would prefer a committee of peers from a similar discipline. And, you know, that may be true. I think if you wanted to say that, I mean, the question would be, does the faculty member in question have any role in choosing the committee? Either the role could be no role, the role could be you get to strike people from the committee, or the role could even be that you get to nominate at least a portion of the committee, to say, you know, I get to choose a person and the chair gets to choose a person, for example, or if it's a face off with the PTR review, the P&T committee gets to choose a person. But I guess whatever it is, I would just encourage some specificity. Farouk.
Patrick, may I jump in? I'm a part of the faculty development committee, and the one thing that the committee was very careful about was not to be too prescriptive, because programs differ in size a great deal. And so, for example, there are some programs where the entire group of tenured faculty members participate in all personnel matters, and then it becomes very straightforward. We thought that this would perhaps be the committee that would automatically handle an appeal. It might be less straightforward in larger programs where only a subcommittee does, and then if it's a grievance, it does indeed become more complicated.
Yeah, if I understand that and appreciate that. If that's the case, then you should probably say, include a parenthetical remark as defined by the department or as defined by the program. And of course, as we know from our own experience over the past 2 years, you could be part of a department that had that arrangement, and then you could be now part of a larger department that involves multiple disciplines with different arrangements. So those things, I guess the question would be who gets to decide, and I'm not sure it matters as much who gets to decide as that it's specified as who's going to make that decision. And or at this level, if you say you don't want to make that determination because there are too many variations, then you would specify the unit that will make that determination, that, you know, this will be spelled out in program guidelines so that then programs know that they have to figure this out over the next few months.
One more comment, and then I guess the committee will probably discuss this. There is a very fine line that we are trying to walk to try and leave as much of the decision making as possible at the program level. At the same time, there is some danger in not being clear enough and leaving vagueness, which makes it more chaotic. And it would be nice to have guidance for the committee from the broad faculty senate as to how best to handle this particular portion.
Yeah, I think as long as you state what is left, as long as it's very clear as to what is left to the local level and what is going to be determined at the university level, that I think you should be fine. So if you come to any place, whether it's this point, or whether it's in this particular section or another section where you want a local entity, such as a program, to make that determination for themselves, then you could just specify that in a parenthetical statement or clause. And on the other hand, if you decide that you want to be specific, I think there's some value to that. so I appreciate what you're trying to do. The one thing I want to make sure that we don't get to a couple of years down the road is something that no one has defined, but needed to be defined. And then we can't actually go through the process because there are too many challenges. And it creates a real uproar where there's just no way that we can move forward with someone's evaluation because there are too many unknowns about how to go through the process. So as long as we don't have that, as long as there's specificity at some level and that the level at which it's to be defined knows that they need to be working on this over the next few months, then I think we should be okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes, thank you. I think we can, I don't want to say easily, but I think we can productively come up with a more specific phrasing and provision here that nevertheless ultimately leaves some kind of room for each program to create this, but in a way that accords with their specific circumstances, but having very clear direction on how that's done. So I think that should be possible. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So I don't see any other hands or questions in the chat on this particular section. So you're welcome to proceed, Patrick.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in response to Yvonne's comment here about departments with very different disciplines, the way throughout, we've always sort of grammatically coordinated or said usually or, department or program. The intent there is always throughout that criteria for promotion, for evaluation, annual evaluation, for PTR need to be created in the unit that accords to the faculty member's discipline. So let's say, Yvonne, obviously you're in my department, English, film, languages, and performing arts. So those, even that appeals committee that we just talked about, must be a committee of peers within that program. There was absolutely would make no sense for an English person or a music person to a theater person to be involved in your appeal, right? That would only make a mess of things. So I think certainly that is the intent behind what we've written, but I through this conversation, I see how we can do a lot more clarifying really to flesh out that intent. Okay. All right, let's move on.
If I can just add, I'm sorry, if I can just add, maybe a possibility is reverse the order, program first, then department, throughout. And the appeals committee, so it's first always at that level, at the smaller unit level. And if necessary, because there aren't 5 people, because there aren't 4 people at the program, you then move out to the larger unit, which would be the department. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we had kind of proceeded through post-tenure review to the point where there might be an appeal. Sorry, there might be after a performance improvement plan that then comes out negative, followed per USG mandate a remedial action. What we added there is that the way that the USG phrased the idea of a remedial action seems to immediately jump to the idea, okay, that's then either you get dinged with pay or you get fired. And I think that's where everybody's thought went. But what we have inserted here is language that remedial action can really be also quite concretely something that, somebody really continues to struggle and hasn't made any improvement on their teaching. And so the chair says then, okay, look, here is your series of pedagogy workshops that would be really helpful as ascertained by, let's say recommended also by peers and so forth. And that is your mandated action. So we try to insert, in other words, a intermediary step where, to use kind of an uncomfortable analogy, we don't immediately have to go to the nuclear option there, that the option can actually be much more targeted and specific and productive. So that really the goal throughout any of these steps is always the improvement and retention of the faculty member, right? Rather than moving somebody out. All right, let's say whatever that remedial action that is formed or prescribed, or I don't know what the right language is here. The remedial action then can also be appealed. And if there is an appeal, then ultimately we have retained the university-wide post-tenure review appeals committee. So we're going back to black language because this is something that we already had before, black font. Now we added something about secret ballot here, and then the committee chair in consultation with the members of the university-wide committee, appeals committee for post-tenure review will prepare a written rationale for the majority opinion. If the committee agrees with the dean's earlier decision, the recommended remedial action shall be in effect. And then 8, if the committee decision disagrees with the dean's determination, it shall issue its recommendation to the provost and faculty member within 20 business days. So it's possible that chair and then dean recommend a certain remedial action, and the committee says, no, we disagree with that remedial action. Then they send their determination to the provost. Now, this is where really our hands are tied again. We have to abide by USG Academic Affairs Handbook because they are quite specific that then the provost makes that decision, after which then also the faculty member has yet another ability to appeal to the president. Again, the president can either side with the provost or overrule the provost, but if the president makes the determination that a remedial action is dismissal, again, this is USG language, then the faculty member still has the option of discretionary review. Discretionary review is not an internal process, but it's a process that runs directly through the Board of Regents, and that was essentially is a, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like a miscarriage of justice, that your rights have been violated throughout this process, and then there would be the external body would be reviewing your case. So that is really your final grievance step in this particular outline. All right, I think that's more or less the substance of this. If you look at the further crossed out language down here, appeal for reconsideration, as I mentioned, some of this with the University-wide Appeals Committee, we moved further up. And then there were some sections that simply have been superseded by new USG policy here. All right, I know this is a lot to take in, but any questions?
Yeah, Yvonne has another question in the chat. She writes, if the deficiency is in professional development, for example, can workload duties reassigned be an option, i.e. assign more teaching and less professional development expectations? And I think that's an interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up, Yvonne, because, and so I'm interested to hear what you say, Patrick, because I think we actually do have some language that I've actually never seen enforced, but it is on the books that particularly for those programs, which I know is not true of every program, but many of the programs that we know of in the humanities and social sciences, for example, in CACSI, among others, among many others, give people a 3-3 teaching load in exchange for the expectation that what ordinarily would be a 4th course is made up for by professional development. If that professional development is insufficient, Yvonne is asking, can they simply be assigned that extra course, no further penalties, and essentially they would be on the track that some universities have, and that we sort of have the framework for. We just really haven't followed it very much, of what are called, some universities, teaching professors are essentially equivalent to lecturers. So what do you think? I know that's not something you address directly. Is that something that you would consider?
I sort of feel, and I don't want to go hunting for it right now, but I sort of feel like that may already be somewhere either in the faculty handbook or somewhere else. If it is, I think we can let that stand as an option. If it's not, I don't actually, or also I think I can speak for the FDC members that oftentimes we discussed listing options, and then usually we pull back from creating too much suggestive language because we didn't want to wade into saying this is what could happen, which then might get translated into making that a prescriptive option. So in this particular case here, so let's look here, for example, for remedial action, teaching, you might get pedagogy workshops. We were essentially suggesting like some of the most benign options. Now, the chair could certainly say, my remedial action, and the dean agrees with that, the remedial action would be to remove you from research faculty and you're only teaching faculty and you will lose your course release. It could be that the faculty member is fine with that and you go about your ways and continue to keep your tenure if that's a remedial action. But we don't think it's in our best interest to already create that as a option up front, because we can, on the flip side, imagine that there would be lots of people who would be upset with that. Plus, there was a whole host of other remedial possibilities that we can imagine. So our choice was to really suggestively hint at, let's go with the easiest possible or the least onerous option, and other options are clearly on the table. Like, for example, we only mentioned dismissal here in the one instance where it's prescribed by the USG. We never added in our own language making that kind of a choice. So that adding that further, sort of like shifting somebody from research to teaching faculty could be on the table as a remedial action, but I'm not in favor of including that here.
Yeah, thanks. I think that makes sense. It is clear in what you're projecting here, that paragraph, that your expectation is that a faculty member who's not meeting expectations in a particular area needs to be given additional educational help, essentially, additional direction and resources to do that. And it seems like a reasonable approach. And if that were the case, then probably a lot of other additional questions would be avoided. So I can see where you're coming from on that. Any other questions for Patrick about anything at all? Yeah, I would echo Yvonne's comment here. Thank you for your excellent work. This is very impressive.
Yes.
I guess, one quick question about something that you asked about 30 minutes ago or so. You asked the question, why would someone go up early? The first thing that occurred to me with that was the USG envisioning something like the British parliamentary election system, where the prime ministers try to call elections at the moment that they'll have the best shot at getting the approval of the electorate. Is that the same thing here, perhaps? In other words, could you, if you scheduled a PTR, you would be exempt from a PTR for the next 5 years unless you received a negative evaluation somewhere along the way, I guess. So do you think some faculty members would benefit just from making that calculation and thinking, okay, well, I'm expecting a great year this year. This would be a wonderful time to just go through the PTR. Maybe even someone would say, next year I know I'm going to be on personal medical leave for part of the year or something of that nature, and they just would prefer to go through this early and then not have to worry about it for another 5 years. Is that a possibility?
Well, it's a possibility, but it's not actually good logic. And let me explain why. Because so you're making that calculation. Oh, like now I have a stellar year. I do an early PTR, and then I can anticipate that in the next 2 years I'm going to have weak years. Well, you're not exempt from the consequences of potentially receiving after your early PTR does not meet evaluations afterwards. So let's say you went up for early PTR, you get 2 consecutive negative evaluations, boom, you're already in corrective post-tenure review again. So you've not really guaranteed that you set yourself up for a 5-year hiatus. That's only if all of your following annual evaluations are fine. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that would actually be quite a dangerous move, just like in England. Who was that who called the early election and then?
Theresa May, I think.
Well, before Theresa May.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, I can't think of his name right now, but yeah.
John Major, probably.
Yes, exactly. John Major. All right. But does that make sense? You're actually never, of course, because of the USG provision with the 2 consecutive annual evaluations, you don't necessarily guarantee yourself 5 years until the next review.
Right.
That's I think it's unfortunate, but that's how they set it up. Oh,
well, very good.
Cameron, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to say that. Remember David Cameron thought he wanted to have a referendum on his administration, and then he fell on his butt. And the Brexit thing, he called for the Brexit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway.
So yes, you have plenty of examples from British history that show that.
Yes, there you go.
Speculation. Okay, well, thank you, Patrick, and thank you to everyone for what I think was a really valuable conversation. Glad we were able to go through this in detail. And so next month, this should be pretty straightforward. Now that we've discussed this in detail, next month we can bring a slightly revised proposal to the Senate floor and move forward with this. And of course, a reminder to everyone, if you want to read through this in more detail over the next few days, I don't know if it's riveting spring break reading, but you can send your comments to Patrick. I think it would be well worth our time because, I mean, there's a lot here and it's really important. It will affect our future careers. So thank you to the work of the FTC and especially to Patrick. Well, let's go to the next agenda item, which is the FITC. So Yvonne, you have an information item on, I think, an important topic some of us have been wondering about for months. And so the floor is yours.
Thank you. We have 2 information items. The first one is a task that we were asked to address early on in the academic year. And it's perhaps creating a faculty communication platform, listserv, something like that. We had a subcommittee within FITC created. Philip Grant, Philip Reeves, and Brian Henderson, they've worked on this for about 7-8 months. And they now have a report ready to share with all of us and a recommendation. But this is an information item today. And so Philip and Brian and Philip are going to explain and discuss it with the Faculty Senate.
Very good. Welcome.
Sorry,
all three. Yeah, go ahead.
My bad. So we've been working on this, as Yvonne said, for several months. I'll try to be brief. When we began discussing about the possibility of having campus-wide communication between faculty members, we realized that we had a lot of experience at larger institutions where this kind of thing is not possible. If there are hundreds of faculty members, teetering into the thousands, it's not going to be possible for people to communicate. But at an institution like ours, it is possible. So we decided to find out what other institutions were doing. Between November and January, we did a convenient sample of people who were faculty senate chairs or co-chairs or about to be chairs and asked them a few questions about communication at their institutions. These are all doctoral professional institutions according to the Carnegie classification of institutions of higher education. And of 147, I was able to find contact information of 65 people pretty easily. Of those 65, 23 responded. And I'll also say that 4 or 5 responded to me and said they didn't want to participate to retain their anonymity, but they gave me some feedback as well. We asked them if their institution had an official listserv. Most said no. If they asked to describe the rules, most of them said there were no formal rules. These were mostly small private institutions. Does your faculty have a means of group communication beyond copying and pasting emails? 48% said no. Briefly describe your faculty's group-based communications. There is a few things: a private listserv, private Facebook group, and a community group in Canvas, which is our version of D2L or CourseDen. So those were a few options that people used to communicate. And these were the people who emailed me separately saying that they had this situation before and lost their ability to communicate and were interested in what we were doing. And it's just with their I have to say they did used to have this at EWG. I don't have the history on that because I wasn't here, and many of us may not have been here when this faculty listserv was wide open and anybody could respond to it. But it can be very chaotic. So our conclusions, we found that open communication is a privilege. We're not the only institution that would like to improve faculty communication across campus. Also, moderation should be done by somebody who is part of their position, because people who volunteer to moderate are not always the best stewards of that moderation. It should be part of somebody's position, whatever they're serving in. Because you can, if a moderator has strict rules, abusive communication can be avoided. And those institutions that don't have rules, that are kind of letting things go right now, will eventually run into a problem. So we found that we wanted there to be some means of faculty communication. We do want to have this privilege. So there were basically 3 options: a moderated listserv, a private Facebook group, and a Discord server. Moderated listserv would have very specific rules, like no political speech, no marketplace, and no direct replies. With very strict moderation, somebody would have to approve each message individually. And that would be somebody's position, like faculty senate chair, co-chair. Another option that's been thrown around is the bursar's office. Several ideas open to interpretation on this. Both a private Facebook group and Discord server would have strict membership. And the speech rules would be much more relaxed. We kind of discussed the pros and cons. And the moderated listserv has more limited speech. The Facebook group would be more popular amongst an older demographic, and a Discord server would be more popular amongst a younger demographic with more ability for abuses of speech. And you can scroll down here. Ultimately, we recommend a 2-pronged approach. We believe that a strictly moderated listserv should be created, and that open communication is important. So we recommended, this was when we were still in committee, the subcommittee, that AAUP create a private Facebook group that only members could discuss issues that would be inappropriate for campus-wide response, campus-wide communication. A moderated listserv would be created for the benefit of research, student success, and programming. These were our potential rules: were no political speech, no humor or satire, limited discussion of institutional policy, strict moderation that requires the approval of a professional moderator, and original posts with only contact information. No message can be replied to directly on the listserv. So if somebody posted something and said, "I'm looking for students to work on this research project," someone would have to copy that person's email, post it into a new email message. They wouldn't be able to directly reply to the listserv. So after having this discussion, we talked with the officers from AAUP. They already have a Google group for this very purpose, and have agreed that they would love all the faculty members to join their Google group for informal conversation with very, very, very loose speech rules that you can discuss anything that you'd like to. Here's our official recommendation to you all. If you'll scroll down a little bit more. The Faculty Senate should create an all-faculty listserv that any adjunct, lecturer, clinical tenure track, or tenured faculty member may post to. The purpose of this listserv is to share potential research or funding opportunities, recruitment for research participants, or opportunities for students. Faculty members may post any message for the aforementioned purposes. Each message must be approved by a moderator before it's posted. Replying to the listserv is not allowed. Respondents must write a new email response to the sender. Any faculty member may opt out of the listserv. In addition to these guidelines, we recommend the following rules for the moderation team. Messages must fall within the purposes of the listserv. No political or religious speech is allowed. No humor or satire speech is allowed. AAUP's Google Group is an appropriate space for discussions of institutional policy and other forms of speech that are not allowed in the listserv. So I'm happy to take any questions about the process we went through to come up with this, or what it might look like in real life.
Very good. I definitely appreciate all the research and thought that you put into this. There's a lot here. Any questions? Any thoughts, discussion? This would be a great time to express concerns or raise questions. We're going to, if this is brought back for a vote next month, of course, we could talk about it then, but it's really useful to be aware of concerns beforehand if you want any revisions. So any comments, any questions? Seeing none, I'll hand things back over to Yvonne for your other information item.
All right, thank you so much. Yes. Our other information item is our recommendation to include 2 additional members to FITC. One would be a member from the police department. The reason behind that is that it's already in our purpose. One of our charges, let's say, is to advise also campus security and safety. We thought it would be wise and smart to invite not to invite, but to have a member from the police department join us in the discussions, especially in topics that are relevant to campus security and safety. So that's one of the things we're gonna recommend and ask for the faculty to vote on later on. Not today, obviously today is an information item. Another member, and the second member that we would like to add is the chair of the Staff Advisory Council to be a member of FITC as an ex officio member. The reason behind that is there are many topics that concern both the faculty and the staff on this campus. For example, the parking fee discussions that we were working, well, they were also working on something parallel. So it would make a lot more sense to have them also, should they choose to, send someone or the chair join us at those conversations and those meetings that are going to be affecting all the campus, faculty and staff. And so that's what we're going to request later on in the year, April, August, whenever, to the faculty to vote to expand FITC membership with those 2 new members.
Very good. Thank you. Kathy, I think your SIA committee has a similar information item for us.
Yes, and again, this is just an information item. Based on the changes, particularly on the administrative side of the leadership side of the university, we have modified our membership and are recommending that we modify our membership to include the appropriate people that were not included before. So for example, we're picking up both the appropriate athletics people, and we are picking up the vice president of enrollment management, people like that. The other thing, as I mentioned before, we are including esports. Esports athletes are as important to the university, and their experiences is as important as any other athlete. Their issues would probably be very similar. And so we're asking that those be included. And as a result, we are also asking that the esports coach be added to the committee, and a representative from esports be added to the committee. Thank you.
Question that came in the chat. What exactly is an esport athlete?
We actually were educated on that, and several of us had children playing esports already. Some of us didn't. Basically, it is a competition, and I know they do it at the high school level on some of these different e-games multi-member player games. And so an esports athlete is somebody who can actually play that competitively. And it is, again, done at high schools and at the college level, and it is very important to students. And it's not Wii. I was assured it was not people who could play Wii.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you, Kathy. And I think now we'll go to the Rules Committee. Angie, I know your committee has several things to propose to us today.
Good evening or afternoon, everyone. Just seems like evening. Okay. Throughout the year, we have met with several people concerning the policies and procedures at the University of West Georgia, that handbook that we use. And for legal purposes, that's what we've been informed. They would like to have the title of this changed to Academic Policies and Procedures Manual, and then again, University of West Georgia. So the proposed, you can see, and then the modified, and the proposed revised is Academic Policies and Procedures Manual, instead of just calling it the Policies and Procedures.
Okay, so the first question should be fairly straightforward, changing this. The only question I would have is whether this is going to affect a lot of references to that, including, I think, even in our statutes, or maybe not our statutes, but we have multiple references to this title, I guess, in different places in the university. And so I guess if we change the title, is there any plan for a project to figure out how to track all of these things down and change the title everywhere where it might appear in any sort of policy? So for example, one of those would be the policy that Kyle Marrero signed that I think I referenced in my research report from last year. There are other things, other references sort of scattered through our policy history that have referenced this title. Maybe there's no good answer to the question, but because I know that the university wants us to change the title, but if we change the title, is there any way to sort of signal that this is the same document? I mean, I guess at the very least on the title page, we could say, formally known as, but I don't know what we would do with all of the other references to it. But I guess that's an issue with name changes in general.
I don't have a good answer for that, Dan, but I could certainly, my committee and I could certainly ask what they plan to do to references throughout. It would be a laborious process to have to go through and present all those name changes to the Senate for a vote. But, you do have, Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong, Colleen, everything goes to Teresa and Teresa Emilio and Terry Ock. Perhaps that could be part of what they do, is go through and look and change the name to. Is that a possibility, Colleen?
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I think, anytime there's a change to the policies and procedures, we have to go through Senate, and then this requires, so everything you're talking about today that you're presenting that is a change or a modification to the policies and procedures, that has to go for a general faculty vote as well. So whenever we have any sort of minutes that are approved, I send those to Front Campus and they go to different individuals on Front Campus. So Teresa Ock, I believe, handles the updates to the handbook, and she handles the updates to the catalog, I think. And then Teresa D'Amelio and the folks over in policy they handle the updates to the policies and procedures, and then I think the policy index as well. So they're sent these items at different times. So I think if we were to go through and clarify this, I would want rules to have a conversation with them about that, about how they would go about doing this, because I don't know if it's as simple as just saying, you know, now referred to as the Academic Policies and Procedures Manual, or if there's going to have to be a different stipulation or a different explanation that's put in there. I know the rationale that was given in your committee, because I've seen the conversations come through between your committee members and Harry Nelson, who is the legal office's representative on rules. So it would be helpful if Harry was here. I don't know if he's here. No, I don't see Harry here. So I mean, I think this is just going to be something that you're going to have to talk with the Office of Legal Affairs about a little bit more. But I think Dan makes a really good point that, you know, we've always sort of flip-flopped between policies and procedures handbook, and policies and procedures manual, but we always know what we're talking about. Adding the word academic is creating a separate manual, and it may cause some confusion, and we need to make sure that that's clarified in the actual document itself and through other things, and I don't know how to do that. Or whether it would just be a friendly amendment, I really don't know. That goes beyond my pay grade.
Yeah. And there's also a comment from Glenn. We can help address that in the university archives, not a direct help, but would help establish document lineage. And Glenn, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, to be clear, of course, you know, we want everyone to know this was not the Rules Committee's idea. You didn't just decide that this would be a good idea to change this. It is going to create some new paperwork hurdles. And I guess my greatest fear is that we would somehow lose the direct link between the documents that gave this particular manual its authority, and, you know, which we've been trying to hold up for the university administration's references several times over the past year to say, look, this is actually a document that is more than just the bylaws of the Faculty Senate. It has, you know, it's been given some fairly substantial authority on campus in the past. And so I want to make sure that was not lost. But you know, I think we'll just have to do the best that we can. I do wonder if on the title page, you know, this doesn't answer every question, but I do wonder on the title page if you could put in parentheses known as policies and procedures until whatever date. This will be April 2022, for example, if that's when it's approved if it's approved today and then approved by the general faculty. That way we would at least have a clear reference in one place that this document is the same document that was created in 1996. But you know,
I think
go ahead.
Glenn mentioned in the chat that the university archives can establish a document lineage. So I think that's a really good point. And then also Dr. Akins, the vice provost, noted that Dr. Nelson, Harry Nelson, is no longer with the Office of Legal Affairs. He's recently transitioned over to the ORSP office. So I think what we need to do also is figure out who the representative from the Office of Legal Affairs is on Rules Committee, since nobody's contacted me about that update.
Or me.
Or you, yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't know who that representative is. It was Harry when this change went through, because I remember seeing the email chain, but no update has been sent to us about him no longer being with the Office of Legal Affairs. I didn't know if he transitioned over to research and was doing both. No information on that has been given to us.
That was my understanding, that it was a divided job, part with legal and part with research, but I I assume that a different change has been made now. And I was never notified he wasn't part of our committee.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is a question for rules as to how to do that. I guess we just move forward with this vote now.
And I will gladly make an appointment to meet with the head of legal affairs and discuss how to maintain the provenance of the document, or making sure that everyone realizes this document is just a renaming of a document we already have. Dan, I like your idea of adding the date for when the title change went on the title page. And then also, Colleen, I can check with legal affairs as to if someone's going to be appointed to be on the committee. And that's a conversation they need to get in touch with you about.
Yeah, and Harry apparently is still attending rules meetings, so
yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so I guess we just move forward with this and see if we want to bring it up for a vote or what.
Yeah. Glenn.
Thanks for, I'm going to make a comment, and maybe this isn't pertinent right here, but I could not find the policies and procedures on the new site that Harry had previously put up. And one thing I'm concerned about too, in sort of this tracking the lineage of key university documents, is to have a PDF or a printable version so that we can keep track of things even within just university archives, to know when document titles were changed and what date they were issued. And the university's always been actually very bad at dating documents. So a consideration that I don't know if your committee would be willing to raise at the same time.
Glenn, I certainly appreciate this, and you are not. I finally downloaded a copy of policies and procedures as a PDF format to keep on my computer because it kept disappearing on the official UWG website. And since it is a document that we use in our committee, it was hard to do our committee work without it being there. So yes, I can bring this up again, that once again, it has disappeared from the website. What, Dan, is this the third or fourth time this year that it's disappeared?
It's the second time this semester.
Okay, thank you. It disappeared several times during the first semester also.
It did. And you sent me a copy because I also need a copy of it to do my job.
Yeah. Well, so I think what we have before us is a change that was strongly requested, in fact, pretty much mandated by the Office of Legal Affairs. It's seemed to be the only way that we can save policies and procedures. At least that's the understanding that I have. There was a strong push from the Office of Legal Affairs to carve up this document, to excise from it the bylaws of the Faculty Senate, but end up scrapping some of the other parts. And so we've been in discussion with Christy and Harry since November of 2020 with this. We've had numerous meetings, some of which I've been involved in, a lot more Angie has been involved in without me. And it seemed that at the end of this nearly year and a half long road, the fact that this document isn't available, is one sign, I think, of where things stand or could or might stand. And it seemed like this seemed to be the only compromise measure, or the best compromise measure, that would actually retain the document intact. So it's being brought to us for a vote. I think we're probably ready for a vote. So we'll go ahead and launch the poll.
Lynn,
Okay.
you know, if you'll send me an email to remind me, I've also got it written down, and I will send you a copy of policies and procedures. And
Yeah.
anyone else, if you just send me an email, I'll send you my copy.
You know what I can do, Angie, is just send one out to the entire Senate roster.
Oh, thank you, Colleen.
Yeah, I mean, it's super easy to do. So the copy that you sent me, I'll just email that out to all of the senators and they can
Okay.
share with their constituency.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, the measure passes, 31 votes in favor, 2 negative votes and 5 abstentions. Thank you. And I think this is actually only the first of several items that you want to bring before us. So go ahead, Angie.
Yes. We would like to, and did we decide we were going to take these two together, Colleen, or do them separately?
We're going to take them as a block, but the first one is the actual table of contents, and then the second one is the
addendum,
you
right?
can present them together, and it's we just took them as a block vote.
Okay, good. We'd like to add an appendix to the policies, the Academic Policies and Procedures Manual, and that appendix, in order for it to be added, we need to add it to the table of contents. So we decided to add it at the end of the entire manual. And that appendix is Dan's paper that explains the history of policies and procedures handbook, now manual, that has been throughout. That he did such a great job explaining where our how this evolved and how it became a part of faculty participation in academic governance. And in order to change the policies and procedures, we also need to add an appendix. So we'd like to add that appendix, and that's Addendum 10. So not only do we change the policies and procedures so you can click right on it and get to it, but there will also, we'd like to have the appendix, which would be Dan's paper, added at the end also.
Any comments or questions on this? If not, we'll launch a vote. And it looks like it passes, 35 in support, 2 negative votes and 1 abstention. So thank you. This was, by the way, not my proposal, but I'm honored that the Rules Committee was interested in doing this. I had nothing to do with the discussion, but thank you.
Well, we felt strongly that if the name is going to be changed, that there should be something in that policies and procedures that explained how this entire manual had originated and the participation the faculty had and how much value we give to this policies and procedures manual and the importance of our voice in self-governance. The next one is at the Faculty and Senate Organization section, which is Article 4, Section 2, Faculty Senate Organization. We would like to add a prequel to that, or a beginning part to it, that explains the importance of having us, the faculty, having a strong voice in the procedures and policies, and where the tradition grew from, the faculty participation, and then the addition of the academic governance in a research paper. And we added that so that it just is a explanation for why we are organizing the Faculty Senate the way that it's organized.
Very good. Seeing no raised hands, I think we're probably ready for a vote. And this passes as well. 36-2 with one, or 37-2 with one abstention. So very good. Back to you, Angie. I think you have 2 more items for us.
Yes. As we know, it was vetoed that we could include proxy votes. So it was sent back at the last meeting to us to take out the proxy vote. And we now have that our meetings, that you may choose a faculty proxy to attend in your place, but you will not be a voting member if you attend. So it takes away the ability of a proxy to attend, but it does give us permission to vote virtually, which is what we've been doing, but now it's officially in the minutes that we can hold Senate meetings virtually, if that is determined to be the best modality or venue for accomplishing the work assigned.
Okay, and of course, this is in response to the president's veto message regarding the proposal in January. So thank you for resubmitting a modified version. Any questions on that? Well, David asked a very good question. Do proxies count towards quorum? And I guess that comes into your next addendum on quorum, which I believe you're defining quorum as voting members. So I believe they would not. Is that correct?
They would not.
Yeah. And then Yvonne asked, can proxies present resolutions in the absence of the senator? So suppose someone asked proxy to submit their chair report for them or to submit a resolution on their behalf. Could they do that?
It would seem to me that the only thing a proxy would not be allowed to do is vote on the final decision, that they would be able to enter into the discussion, that they would be able to present resolutions, any of those.
Yeah. And so Shelley asked, and we have no other way to push back on the president's veto. That's, well, let me respond to that quickly. So as I told all senators in an email announcing this, I would be happy to introduce an appeals measure for this item if anyone sent me a request to do so, and I did not receive a request to do so. And then I reiterated that statement in a meeting of the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, and I have not received any request to introduce an appeals motion. And I think that there's good reason in this case not to go through the process unless someone really wants to do it. What we would be able to do if we decided to appeal this would be to first bring this to the Senate. And then if it passes overwhelmingly, then it goes back to the president. The president would either accept it or issue a new veto statement. If there's a new veto statement made, we would then hold a vote of the general faculty. If the general faculty supported it, we would then send it back to the president, and the president at that point would send it to the chancellor. My sense on this is that if we went through the process, we would not be able to complete the process before the Faculty Senate would begin meeting again in the fall. So this revised version would allow us to have something in place rather than to hold that up. The second thing I would say is that we have never won an appeal to a veto before. That doesn't mean that we couldn't, but it ultimately depends on getting support from the chancellor. And so if we were going to appeal a veto, we might want to think about what sort of message this would communicate to the chancellor. The best way I guess the question would be, would the chancellor be in support of what we're doing, and is this the sort of thing that we want to use as a test case going forward? And my sense has been that since I didn't get anyone asking to push back on this, that there wasn't necessarily the momentum among the faculty to really sustain this long appeals process and trying to make an argument to the chancellor, that sort of thing. So that's kind of a long answer to the question. Yes, we have other ways to appeal the president's veto. Would they work? Not necessarily. And would it be time consuming? Yes. But if someone wants to discuss that further, we could certainly talk about it. No additional comments. So I guess we're probably ready for. Okay. Yeah.
Wait,
Shelley,
whoa,
go ahead.
whoa. I don't know. I kind of feel like we should push back. Maybe I'm the only one, but I kind of feel like we should push back on this because, one, life happens sometimes, and another fact, shared governance and faculty governance means faculty. It doesn't mean, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not very articulate right now, but I just think, doesn't anybody else think we should push back on this? Am I the only one?
Glenn. And Scott Gordon says, I agree with Shelley. Glenn.
While I agree that it would probably be unwise to pursue this at this time, I also agree with Shelley, and I see this as an erosion, a small erosion, but nonetheless erosion of faculty senate power. And specifically, by not allowing a proxy to vote, it actually diminishes us as faculty's Senate members' ability to take sick time or vacation time or to participate in professional development opportunities as we might otherwise do. That, faculty senate is once a month. I mean, there's a lot of time conflicts that arise. And so in fact, it is taking away our right of time to take annual leave, to take sick time to care for children or whatever, and professional development opportunities, and take advantage of having proxies in our place. So I do see it as a danger.
Yeah, Farouk.
If it is okay, Dan, I want to think out loud for a moment and look for precedent in other meetings where we allow proxies to vote. So let us say we take the hypothetical of a promotion or tenure decision. Are proxies allowed to vote in that instance? Or can a person vote in absentia somehow?
Well, the veto only pertained to the faculty senate. So it doesn't, it wouldn't necessarily pertain, well, it doesn't pertain to the individual departments and programs and other committees. I mean, there was some question as to whether it pertained to faculty senate committees, and we were hoping to ask the president about that today. But of course, the president wasn't able to attend the meeting, so we don't really know where Senate committees stand. But I would definitely say the veto, as written, could not pertain directly to anything outside of the Senate, since it was just focused on the meetings of the faculty senate. Now, one could say philosophically the principle applies, but it doesn't directly affect that. So, Mike, or go ahead. No, go. I didn't want to cut you off, Farouk. Go ahead.
So, in principle, I agree with Shelley and Scott Gordon and one other faculty member whose name I forget. I'm also, again, as I'm growing older, I'm asking the question, is there a lot of wisdom in symbolic votes that will keep getting vetoed? And so that's a question that, we have to ask. Yes, it is important, but do we do symbolic votes which will be vetoed eventually, and then to what end?
Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to point out there's two different, like we talk about precedents. I appreciated the information you provided to us about which institutions allow proxies and which doesn't, but that's not necessarily the precedent. The precedent is which faculty senates have made that decision for themselves, right? Like if we as a Senate said we don't want proxies, we wouldn't have proxies, but the precedent would be we were authorized and we empowered to determine how we operate as a Senate. So I think that's a separate precedent from whether there are proxies. It's did those institutions, did their Senate decide, or were they told that's how it has to be? Because I think that's what we're pushing back against is at least I'm with Shelley. I think we should be able to decide how we operate with regards to our daily operations, not what we have jurisdiction over, but how we operate, how we do our business. For example, quorum is something that's determined in the bylaws. And if we decided that quorum was different than 50%, that's something that in every organization, Robert's Rules of Order says the body determines what a quorum is. We don't get told by somebody else that. And I think of proxies like that. So I would just make that comment about precedent.
I have to tell you that I totally agree. I was concerned about the proxy vote, but I think that it's important for us to get on the record that we are legal having virtual meetings, because that's one of the legal concerns that we're having right now, is that everything says that there is no legal language that says we can have a virtual meeting. And if somebody decides to press on that, then that could turn into a sticky legal affair. So getting the fact that we can meet virtually passed, then perhaps we can go back and in the fall begin the work on the proxy vote. Not necessarily say we're going to do away with the fact that we want to have proxies, but let there be discussion and table it right now and then put it into proposals. Right now, it says that a faculty proxy may be appointed by the senator to attend the meeting in their place. It doesn't say anything about we're marking out as a voting member, which is what got passed in January and vetoed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're merely putting back the language that was originally there, taking out as a voting member, which we added, and voting can we be held virtually.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can give you a couple options. I think that's a great point, Angie, and I'll weigh in with some options for us in just a second. I know a couple people have their hands up, and several people have said in the chat, can we just vote on the virtual aspect of the meetings but push back on the veto for the proxy? And I'll suggest some ways to do that. Let's see, Shelley took her hand down, I think, unless you want to speak, Shelley, but I see you've put something in the chat. And if that's the case, that you've lowered your hand, I'll go to Scott.
Thank you, Dan. I had a question about something Farouk was saying earlier about second veto just ending up being symbolic. Did I hear something before that, though, about it going to the chancellor if it was a second?
Yeah, every time we appeal a veto, if the president doesn't accept it, then it goes to the chancellor. So okay. We had that issue once last year. We've had some vetoes that we did not appeal, and we've had some, for lack of a better term, pocket vetoes or something of that nature they were phrased in such a way that it was difficult to come up with a way to appeal it. It's kind of complicated. There have been several vetoes, I'll say that, but we've appealed one it was a different chancellor, Steve Wrigley at the time, and we did not win that on appeal. But we do not have the power to override a president's veto. That is not a power that's been given to us by the USG. What we do have the power to do is to continue appealing to the president, and then, of course, have a general faculty vote, and then have that sent to the chancellor, and the chancellor makes the ultimate decision. I could be wrong, but I suspect, we did not get any, we've never won with previous chancellors. And my guess is there's less of a chance of winning with this current chancellor or the incoming chancellor in April. But, I don't know that for certain. That's just a general view that many people have, I guess, across the USG with the faculty senate chairs. But we've had no experience working with him, so we don't know for sure. Yvonne.
Yes, I have a question. What is in black now is how it used to be, how it always was? Am I correct in
No,
that, Angie?
this is how what is in black is everything that we voted on in January. So this is new that the Rules Committee created. There are some things that existed before, like special meetings may be called by the president.
Okay.
But the proxy language was new, that we voted on that in January. And the Zoom meetings, where it says modality may determine that modality may be the best venue for accomplishment. That was what we voted on in January. So what we're seeing all together is how this looked at the January Senate meeting with 4 words crossed out as a voting member. So it's exactly what we voted on in January, except for deleting those 4 words.
But what was vetoed was a faculty proxy may be appointed by the senator to attend the meeting as a voting member. And I don't remember what in the president's explanation, what was he objecting to vetoing, the proxy or the voting part?
He said that he was objecting to the voting. Let me see if I can pull up. May take a second here.
Because if that's the case, while you're looking for that, if that's the case, what I would suggest then, my suggestion is, if it seems that he will not object to the proxy part, what he would object to is the voting part, that I would suggest then presenting voting for what Angie has presented, get this approved, hopefully, get the virtual meetings approved, hopefully, tackle then in the fall as something separate once this part is approved, hopefully, spelling out what the proxy can do then and give the voting. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think so. So I can suggest several possibilities for us, and that's actually one that I was thinking was one of the more likely ones. So yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Colleen. This is what the president said, and specifically what he said is, while proxy attendance may be supported, hence that's why we tried to keep it, or the Rules Committee tried to keep it, rather. I should say I wasn't involved in the discussion, but Rules Committee tried to keep that. Voting on items brought before the Faculty Senate should be reserved for those elected members of the Faculty Senate. So basically what this motion does is it concedes the point to the president on the specific point that he made. And I would be interested.
Dan, I'm sorry. Can a senator then give a proxy to another senator? It doesn't say that. It's those elected members of the Faculty Senate. So I can give my proxy to another senator.
But you can only serve as a proxy so we've actually had this happen before. So we've had a senator try and serve as a proxy for another senator in a meeting, and you can only attend as one person. So if you're going to serve as a proxy as a vote to vote for 2 people, you can't do that. You can only vote for yourself, but it would have to be a senator vote. This happened at, I can't remember what meeting it was. It was a couple years ago where during roll call, a senator said, I'm here for so-and-so, and they were told, no, you can't. You can only be here for yourself.
Okay, thank you, Colleen.
We may handle this, Dan, the new definition for quorum that the Rules Committee is presenting is that A quorum for the Senate and its committees shall be 50% of the membership in attendance at a meeting of the respective bodies. So it's not 50% of the elected members, but 50% of the people that are there. So if we have 28 people there, a quorum will be 14.
Well, I guess I'll have to see the language on that to see if that would work, because I guess with the Zoom meetings, we have so many people attending who are not part of the
Right.
Senate. The question is, how does that work? But we can talk about that with quorum. But let me go back to the question about the veto. So thanks for showing this, Colleen. I think we can go back now to the document we're looking at before as part of the agenda, the appendix. Thanks. Yeah. So I can give you a couple options. So first of all, what I would suggest is if we want to appeal this veto, and it sounds like a number of people would, we can't do that today. I don't think. I mean, I guess technically we could introduce it under new business, but I'd prefer to wait until April, when it's actually on the agenda and there are no questions that we're actually voting on it. It can't be challenged. So we could vote on it in April to appeal the veto. And that the way that you appeal a veto is to vote for the original language that was vetoed, which would mean voting for this except for those 4 words not crossed out. That's all we could do. We couldn't modify it at that point. We would have to vote for the whole thing as a block. And then if that passes, well, first of all, we'd have to wait for the president to sign or veto that. By the time that happens, I'm guessing that the semester would be over, because the president usually waits about 30 days to respond to things. But then after that, we could hold a general faculty vote. We could decide whether to do that in late May or June when people are away, and there's no reason we couldn't, because we're allowed to hold Senate meetings in June, so we could certainly hold general faculty votes in June, or we could wait until August, and I don't know if it would make any difference either way, but then that would go to the president's desk again, and then it would, if he decided not to accept it, he would have to present this to the chancellor, and it's actually the president who presents it to the chancellor. Which does create a little bit of an awkward situation in the sense that we don't get to present our reasoning. It's the president who presents this to the chancellor. And so then the chancellor would respond, presumably sometime in the fall. There's no deadline by which the chancellor has to respond. But I think, I agree that there's some value in standing on principle. We haven't done that with every single thing the president has vetoed, but I think it seems like there are several people who would like to make this one of those moments of standing on principle. And I certainly believe in protecting faculty governance, but I would say that if we did that, there would be a lot of value, as Angie said, in voting on this today. If we won on the appeal, which would be a surprise to me, but if we did win the appeal, then what we would win on appeal would replace what we vote on today. But if we don't win on appeal, we really want to have what we have here, because this protects several things. First of all, it protects some form of proxy. But more importantly, I think, it also protects the right for us to choose the modality of our meetings. And as the university council told us, that currently we don't, our meetings are not legal. Someone could challenge everything that we're doing in our meetings if they're not held face-to-face, because our bylaws, in her interpretation, which is probably true, stipulate a face-to-face format or imply a face-to-face format. So I think there's a lot of value in passing this today, but it sounds like there's, I've certainly received in the chat and on the floor enough calls to, more than enough calls, I think, to merit bringing this back to vote for an appeal. And then I received one comment in the chat on this, a private message that I need to read. So give me just a second for that. Okay, so I'll read this. So is it possible to submit a comment on the proposed changes to section 2 of the preamble? Okay, so I think this goes back well, this I think is on another conversation. So let's just vote on this first, and then we'll go back to this preamble that we talked about. So yeah, let me we'll go back to that later, but I want to make sure that we don't lose the focus of this particular discussion. So anything else that anyone wants to say about this proposal that's on the floor that I think, in other words, vote on this today, and then, I'll promise to bring something back for the veto, to appeal the veto next meeting, and we can talk about it. We may get, I hope we don't end up with a situation, but we probably will end up with additional vetoes before April. So we may have several that we consider as a package. Ideally, that would not happen, but we'll see. Scott.
Thank you, Dan. I'm sorry, I wanted to get some clarification on something you said a moment ago about if how the president would present the veto to the chancellor. So if we appealed the veto and we included some sort of a statement with our reasoning, he would never have to share that with the chancellor. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct. Now, before when we presented a veto to the president, so the veto that we appealed to the chancellor in the 2020-2021 academic year was a change to the composition of the Faculty Senate Executive Committee to allow the president of the campus AAUP chapter to serve as a non-voting member of the executive committee. And when that went through the whole appeals process, I emailed the chancellor and said, "This is coming from the you'll hear from the president, but I just want you to know this is coming. If you have any questions, let me know." So there's nothing that prevents me from communicating with the chancellor, and certainly I would try to present this, but when it's formally presented, it's formally presented by the president, and the chancellor has the final word, and the chancellor communicates to the president, not to me. So in my view, it's the chances of winning on appeal are low. Very low, I would estimate, but I have no way of knowing that for sure. And we could certainly try. We could see what happens, but I would want people to know that before we started the process. But all of that is something we could talk about in more detail in April. Just because I bring it back to the Senate doesn't necessarily mean that people have to vote to send it to the general faculty, though. There's a lot of value if this is what people wanted. People voted on it in January, voted to approve it. It sounds like people would like it now. We could certainly go through the process. Farouk.
As a senator, I would personally want the greatest amount of flexibility to attend Senate meetings. Is it possible to come up with a compromise proposal within quotes, wherein since we know what items we are going to vote on, let's say a senator authorizes his or her proxy to vote a certain way on each of the motions that would be presented that Senate meeting, would that be okay? Just a suggestion.
Yeah, well, that would require sending this back to the Rules Committee. And I just, that's more of, that would involve enough changes in wording that I'm just not sure we could legitimately do that as a friendly amendment. So I think that would actually complicate the situation further. It's an interesting idea. My guess is it would not have worked. I really would like to get this. I would really like to see what the president would say to this particular proposal, because the president has not promised to sign this. This proposal that we're looking at today meets this president's stated objections for the veto. So I think it's a wonderful test case. Will the president sign this? And if not, well, then we force the president to go on record with some additional objections. But I guess at this time, I don't want to complicate things unnecessarily by not exactly complying with the president's veto, besides the fact that we couldn't actually do that today. We'd have to actually send it back to the Rules Committee and ask them to send us yet another item in April.
Thank you, Dan.
And then David Nickel said, does a senator have to submit a vote at the time a vote is asked, or can there be a time period to submit a vote? And that's an interesting point as well. You know, we do have electronic votes on items. Yeah, I guess we haven't really talked about that. That's an interesting idea. I think it goes beyond what's mentioned here. But you know, that could be, you know, something additional for the Rules Committee to decide if they wanted. Well, okay, I think at this point, I appreciate everything people have said. So let's vote on what we have. And then, as I said, in April, you'll get to see the original item that the president vetoed that you voted on at the January meeting. So seeing no further discussion, let's call a vote. And it looks like it passes with 33 votes, no negative votes and 2 abstentions. So thank you. Before we go to the quorum, I want to read you what I received in chat about something we voted on before, and it may be too late to modify it, but I do want to read what the person said. Okay, so is it possible to submit a comment on the proposed changes to section 2 of the preamble? So if we go back to section 2 of the preamble, yes, I think this is it. Okay, so to my mind, it reads as too faculty centric and does not recognize the core importance of shared governance, which I see as better decision making that directly benefits students. Our tradition of shared governance is something to be proud of and is important, but is not the best reason to defend and support shared governance. No problem if it's too late to receive and consider this feedback. So yeah, I appreciate the comment that I guess this faculty member would have liked to see more reasoning, not just that we've always done this, but that this actually benefits students. And I guess, as I said, we've already voted on it, so it's kind of late for any additions or friendly amendments, but you're welcome to respond to that, Angie, if you want.
This came after a tremendous amount of discussion, and we felt with a lot of wordsmithing, and we felt that it best reflected, since this is about faculty governance, that this was the best way to state it. But we serve at the pleasure of the Senate, so.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, there's a lot more that obviously could be said in defense of shared governance, but I appreciate what you did. Thank you for your tremendous work here. I know the Rules Committee has been very busy. You were extremely busy last year. You've continued to have a lot to do this year. So I appreciate what you've written, and I think it provides a really strong defense. Okay, well, let's move on, Angie, to the very last thing you have, I believe, the quorum. So you can tell us what you've done there.
That's Article 3, Bylaws of the Faculty Senate, letter F, quorum. The quorum for the Senate and its committee shall be 50% of the membership in attendance at a meeting of the respective bodies. We added again just 5 words to what was already there. And we added in attendance at a meeting to explain what a quorum was. And we were told that the Senate could decide for itself what it wanted a quorum to be.
Okay, so let me, and Farouk has a question. Maybe I'll go to Farouk's question first. I have a question too, but let's go to Farouk. Farouk.
Okay, I must confess I don't understand in attendance at a meeting. So let's say we have 50 members in a Senate, and if only 10 show up, so what's the quorum then?
5.
Okay, if 2 show up, what's the quorum?
1.
Okay, so can we have a Senate meeting with just 2 members present?
I don't know. I mean, it might be stated in another part of the handbook, but
respectfully, I think it defeats the purpose of defining a quorum. So one person could show up, and yes, we cannot cut a person in half, but that means that on some day we could have 1 senator show up and have a Senate meeting the way this is worded.
Yeah, and David asks, when would quorum never be met? And the answer is, it would always be met at the beginning of a meeting. The only time it would not be met, and some meetings actually deal with this, face this situation, but it would not be met if we had large numbers of people leaving. And that would actually be one of my concerns about the Senate with this, that 50% in attendance at a meeting, basically, the only time quorum would not be met, I guess, would be if halfway through the meeting, more than half of the people there left the meeting. But I understand why you did this, Angie. I think I understand, because a number of the committees have sometimes risked not meeting quorum, is my understanding. When there's, if it's a fairly small committee and you have several people who can't make a particular meeting date, then the question is, how are you going to move forward? But I also understand where some of the people raising objections are coming from, that this could get into some strange problematic territory if taken to the extreme. Yvonne.
This could be resolved where we don't have to put this 50% in attendance if we are able to get the proxies approved, because then there could always be a minimum number of 50% of the membership, not the attendance then, because if we can't make it, then we can always send someone. So I think the proxy part, if we approve that, if we get that approved, can take care of this part of not having 50% in attendance, but rather 50% of membership present. Does that make sense?
And we are more than welcome to take this back if we decide to table it and send it back to committee and propose it again once the proxy conundrum is resolved.
Yeah, it appears that if the modified version that we approved today is approved by the president, then we would have people who would be able to attend as proxies who would count for the purposes of attendance, even if they couldn't actually vote. Maybe that would be enough. Rosemary.
I guess I'm just wondering if maybe there is like an error in the way that it's worded. And I guess if you could speak a little bit more, Angie, to what the intention of the committee was in writing it this way, because I understand a quorum to mean how many people need to be in attendance at the meeting. So it's almost a little bit circular as I read it, the way that it's written. A quorum is what percentage of the membership need to attend the meeting, right? I don't know if my question is coming through clearly, But I wonder if there's maybe just a wording issue, and if you could maybe speak to what the intention of the committee was, maybe we could just wordsmith it a bit.
It came about for specifically a concern that was sent to us by several committees, that several times throughout the year, they had trouble meeting a quorum. So they were unable to conduct a meeting that could pass any meaningful legislation to be passed on to the Senate, or meaningful agenda items, because they couldn't get a quorum. And they were asking, could it be that they could vote 50% of the membership in attendance at the meeting? So you had 8 people at a meeting, you had 8 people in your committee, and 6 people showed up. And they wanted to know, could we just have 3 people be a quorum rather than it having to be 4 people being a quorum? And that's why we wrote it the way we wrote it.
So wait. Okay, so by quorum, it sounds like the way you're describing this, you were conflating, unless I misheard you, you're conflating quorum with majority vote, right? So I would say if there are 8 people on the committee and 6 people show up, you have quorum. Or let me make this easier. If you have 8 people on the committee and 5 show up, you have quorum. And then if 3 of those people vote in favor of something, you have a majority vote of the people who are there, and you pass the resolution. That's different, I think, than quorum, because quorum is not saying you have to have an absolute majority of the total membership of the body to pass
Okay,
a question. Quorum is saying how many people have. Quorum is saying how many people have to attend. And so I'm really glad that Rosemary asked this question. Thank you, Rosemary, because I think it clarifies something. Because I think we're using quorum in different ways. What quorum means is how many people, what percentage of the people do you need to, who are there, have to be there for a vote to occur. So that's why Farouk was saying, well, what if only 2 people show up of the whole Senate? Can they vote? Well, the answer we've generally assumed is no, that we have to have at least 26 people, 26 senators show up in order to hold a vote. But once those 26 people show up, we could have 15 people abstain, and 6 people vote in favor of a resolution. And while it seems strange, those 6 people would actually carry a resolution because they're a majority of the votes cast of a 6-5 resolution. So, but that's, yeah, so I think we'll probably need to do some wordsmithing on this because we may be dealing with different issues between quorum and majority vote.
We can certainly send it back to rules.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you. So yeah, and when I think, what you could say is a quorum for the Senate and its committees would be 50% of the membership need to be in attendance for votes to pass. And then you could say, which I think was what we've already been using as our definition, but then a majority of the votes cast, not including abstentions, will carry a motion. Farouk.
Thank you for clarifying, Dan. I apologize for my question earlier if it was slightly sharply worded. Would it be appropriate to have a friendly amendment where we change the language of just the word quorum to a majority vote or something like that? And then I think we can, and I now understand the intent of the committee. So all we need to do is change the word quorum to a majority vote. And then I think it sounds great.
Well, not quite. It's a good point, but it's not quite, because unless we wanted to change our procedure, what we have used so far in the Senate is a majority. a resolution passes with a majority of the votes that are cast. And abstention votes don't count as votes that are cast. So, you know, if you were, we certainly have been in situations where, not often, but occasionally, with a close vote, where something may pass with less than 50% of the members who are in attendance supporting that. Which I also don't think was I don't think that was, I don't think the intention, unless you want to correct me, Angie, I don't think the intention was to say that was to increase the bar, raise the bar, the threshold by which a vote would have to pass. It's you're not trying to say that you want, if a majority of the members, that you have to get 50% of the membership in support of something for anything to pass. So I guess, I guess the question is what do we need? I think the original reason for the Rules Committee considering this is because we were told by the University Council that we had not defined quorum and that we were encouraged to do so. But in addition, as you said, Angie, there was this other problem. So, I think there are a couple possibilities. One of the easiest ones would be, as you suggested, you could take this back to rules and see what you want to do. Another possibility would be to strike the words in red, in attendance at a meeting, and just leave it at there's a quorum for the Senate and its committee shall be 50% of the membership of the respective bodies. But then, I know you'd like to add something for what constitutes a majority vote, what do you need to get in terms of votes for something to pass? And that would probably be beyond friendly amendment territory. So it might be best, if you're interested in just reworking this, Angie, that may end up being the easiest.
That's fine. And I appreciate everybody's feedback. And I think we've got a clearer idea of where we want to proceed.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, and then a comment from the chat from Yvonne, what about something like this? For there to be quorum, 50% of the total membership must be in attendance. A resolution passes with a majority vote of the quorum. So good suggestion.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Okay, well, thank you, Angie, for that marathon session. Appreciate that. And now we go to the last committee report from Jason for the TLA committee.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, everyone. So we have one item to present to vote on and then some information items. And the first is the student evaluation instrument proposed revisions. And this instrument has not been touched or revised in probably about 10 or 11 years. And I would like to put that up for a vote but I'm totally willing to answer any questions that anyone has about the process we engaged in or the revisions.
And I know this was the product of about a year's worth of survey data gathering. You sent out surveys to faculty. You spent a lot of time sifting through the material.
Also students were surveyed as well. There were sessions at the start of the academic year. I even remember when I first got here, sitting at a table with John Morris and Sally Richter, one of the TLA tables in the Coliseum, talking about the revisions. So the committee has been working on this for quite a few years and collecting a tremendous amount of data. And we had a subcommittee that Rod McRae headed up, and we actually worked all through one summer on weeding through all the information, all the data that had been collected, and drafting proposed revised questions, as well as identifying the questions where the majority had decided they want to keep them. And then we moved it towards the committee for further revision as new members came in, and the committee voted on approving these revisions to put towards Faculty Senate.
Well, very good. Yeah, thank you for your long work in this, which I know your committee, as I said, has been working for many months on this item. I don't see any comments, raised hands, so we may be ready to vote. Let's have the vote. And it looks like this passes overwhelmingly. 33 votes in support, 1 against, and 1 abstention. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And now I think you have some information items for us.
I do, and I'll go pretty quick on those. I'll be continuing as chair of TLA through the next academic year. In addition to the SEI revisions that were just approved, we are with a subcommittee in our group. They are working on a revision timeline process and identifying basic data to collect, so that there'll be a revision and review process that we'll bring to all of you in April, so that the SEI can go through data collection, data analysis, review, and revision in a timely manner, instead of someone saying, oh, we think we should do this, but it'll kind of codify it in a reasonable time. So we'll bring that. And we are still in the process of working on the proposed policy that was approved by Faculty Senate, but sent back to us from the president for more work. And so that's still in the process, and hope to have that resolved soon. And that's all I have for information items.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that. I do not see any raised hands or any comments in the chat. So thank you very much, Jason. Well,
thank you.
That concludes our committee reports, and we have no old business or new business. I do not believe Kathy has a raised hand. Kathy, the floor is yours.
Hi, sorry about this. I kind of want to go back to something we went over earlier. I'm not sure if it's appropriate here, but I was having some internet issues as this big band of weather passed over. So I wasn't able to follow up my questions to Dr. Akins, who appears to still be here. This is, of course, is in relation to the degrees being offered completely face-to-face at Newnan and Douglasville. So I appreciate your indulgence here, because I think it's important to have some public recognition as to what transpired. With regard to how the decision was made, it's my understanding that the decision to offer the face-to-face courses at Newnan was not made in consultation with either the Dean of CACSE or the Chair of DAPS. Rather, we were simply informed that this will happen. Nowhere along the line was the program of psychology consulted, nor, I'm guessing, was the other program consulted. At the end of the day, this was another top-down decision that didn't involve any consultation with any of the parties that were involved. So again, I was having connection issues while I was listening to Dr. Akins respond, so I can't be certain that this question was answered. So I'm going to ask it again, along with a couple of other questions. First, my question was, would there be any support from administration for these programs to implement this plan in terms of additional monies to hire LTAs and or adjunct faculty? The second question is, will the psych program or other affected programs be given grace in terms of SCH for these Newnan sections that are by design going to be under enrolled, which of course then is going to bring down our numbers? And then finally, given the declining opportunity for faculty and others to give input on these, at so many levels, can we expect that other programs are going to also simply be placed at Douglasville or Noonan without any input from faculty? I'm hoping again that Dr. Akins is still here to answer those questions for me.
Yeah, good questions about the role of faculty in formulating these programs or being absent from their formulation. Dr. Akins, if you are still around at this hour, would you like to respond to those questions from Dr. Scott Meyer?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I will repeat again that the discussions occurred at various levels, and the plan that you see for the 5 years is the plan for the 5 years. In discussion with, I believe, the program coordinator, the dean, and the department chair, there was made already a change to the 5-year plan in consultation again with these parties. A discussion was had that there will be a meeting with the faculty. It is my understanding that Dr. Devine, I believe, is meeting with Rebecca Smith next week on this. And to reiterate, the questions around psychology were the only program that had additional questions and clarification needs. We would be very happy to continue the discussion and clarify everything. Multiple discussions about the planning both for Douglasville and Noonan have occurred at the Dean's Council, the Extended Dean's Council, individual meetings with deans, and of course the Provost Council. So again, I would be very happy to be a part of the meeting with the department. About funding, Provost Preston has reiterated on multiple occasions that there is support from the Provost Office for part-time faculty to support initiatives on the 2 campuses. About workload distribution, these are ongoing discussions between Dr. Preston and the deans, and I believe that those are in progress. So I hope this satisfies at least part of your question.
That's it. My understanding, though, was that these discussions did not actually take place with the people who were directly involved with this program being put onto the Noonan campus. So I think that we are in disagreement there in terms of how far that discussion went.
And it is fine to have a disagreement. If involved parties at the meeting, I would invite participation.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Kathy. I'm glad you were able to log in for this later part of the meeting, even if your internet connection was interrupted earlier. We have one announcement, and I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but Colleen may have just one additional piece of information on this. Colleen, do you want to say anything about the Cook West cookbook briefly?
Yeah, so some of you probably have seen the emails come through that the Help West Employee Benevolence Fund is launching another run of the Cook West cookbook. So we have on the agenda for you a link that will take you to the pre-order page, and you can pre-order through April 8th. I think I saw in one of those emails that this will be the last run. So if you haven't gotten one now and you're interested in getting one, it seems like this might be retired after this April 8th deadline.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any other announcements that we need to be aware of before we close the meeting? And I see Shelley has
real quick.
Go ahead.
Real quick. April 20th through the 24th, the theater company will produce Heathers the Musical. If you remember the movie starring Winona Ryder and Christian Slater from 1989, it is based on that. It's a lot of camp and fun, so you can escape and come see it. April 20th through the 24th in the Townsend Center. Thanks.
Very good. Anything else that we need to be aware of? I think that may be it for the meeting. So thank you, everyone. I hope you'll have a wonderful spring break, and I'll look forward to seeing you in April for what may be our last meeting of the semester. Thanks. Have a good weekend and a good break.